Episode 5. You originally won your love rival and didn't feel guilty at all. Now that you crashed into your love rival, and since she is laying in the hospital right now, you are scared that Chen Xinan might want to atone for your crimes or become soft-hearted. He might implicate himself with your love rival. Gutong analyzed clearly and logically. You're distracted not because of work, but because of your mind's thoughts. Xin Haoyue was speechless. Lately, she was unwilling to see Chen Xinan because she didn't want to think of Sheng Wenyang. If she was the one laying in the hospital, maybe she wouldn't feel guilty. She laughed and said, maybe you're right. Gutong happily said, Xue, you've fallen in love. You really fell in love. Heh. Can she retrieve it back? Her heart. Because of the program, Xin Xue returned to a city. She had a pretty good collaboration with Zhanlan. But after the program ended, Zhanlan wanted to eat out with her. She smiled and said, hopefully the next time I see you will be on your wedding, right? You'll send me the wedding invitation, right? Xin Xue couldn't help but laugh. How do you want a single person like me to send you a wedding invitation? President Chen consented too. Zhanlan laughed and said. Xin Xue could only laugh along. She thought, nothing has even happened between the two of them. Chen Xinan naturally detected Xin Xue purposefully avoiding him. But because Sheng Wenyang just got into an accident, he thought that she needed time to adjust. At the same time, he was a bit angry that she wanted him to be with Sheng Wenyang at the hospital. There were many ways to compensate Sheng Wenyang, but not this kind. She needed time, and he was busy with work. It's better if the two of them took some time to calm down and think. On the other hand, after Sheng Wenyang stayed in the hospital for about 10 days or so, an uninvited guest came. Shi. After Shi came in the room, she observed her and said shockingly, I didn't think you would be in such serious conditions. Tsk, you're quite pitiful. What do you mean? Nothing, I just pity you. I don't need your pity. Shi laughed and said, how good would it be if it was Xin Haoyue in an accident? But it's not that good. The car accident couldn't take her life. If Xin Haoyue can't die, then it is no fun. Sheng Wenyang heard this and was shocked. She investigated Xin Haoyue before and knew that her change started after she fell down the stairs. Shi was the one who had pushed her. She originally thought they just had a simple debate. Now that she looked at this wasn't that simple. Shi wanted Xin Haoyue's life? What deep hatred do you hold against Xin Haoyue? You actually wanted her to die. Sheng Wenyang looked at her in alarm. Shi sweetly smiled and said, can I not want her to die despite not having a deep hatred for her? If she doesn't die, how can you obtain Chen Xinan? Why do you want to help me? We don't know each other. Who said that? Shi said, we are both on the same team. Once she dies, this story can finally return to its normal path. I hate how people criticize and try to change the world I created. Sheng Wenyang looked at her and was in deep thought. Shi continued to say excitedly, why don't I give you a nice suggestion? A suggestion where you can be free of worries forever, and you wouldn't need to see the Xin Haoyue you dislike anymore, but also able to obtain Chen Xinan forever? How does this sound? Are you moved? Sheng Wenyang felt a gust of cold breeze. She asked sternly, what do you want to do? Obviously something good. Can't you see that I am racking my brain and trying to help you? Shi laughed and said, do you want to hear this suggestion? Sheng Wenyang looked at the person in front of her. She felt like this person was a devil coming from hell. She shivered at this gloomy and strange aura. How did Xin Haoyue land up with this enemy? Shouldn't the person asking to be blessed be Xin Haoyue now? Xin Haoyue, who was in a city working, didn't detect anything. After she was done with Zhanlan's interview, her boss introduced a new target for interview. They were also in the entertainment circle. However, this time, it was a film emperor who had received numerous titles. Right now, he was filming scenes in the mountain area and didn't have time. The program group decided to go over to interview him. It was a long drive there. When Xin Haoyue followed the group over, who knew she would have gotten into an accident? Besides the vast weeds in the overgrown countryside, no one was seen. But not far on the road near the weeds, Xin Haoyue silently fell in her pool of blood. The white shirt was dyed red, and she quietly laid in a pool of blood. Shutting her eyes tightly, her fingers slightly moved before it dropped. After Chen Xinan woke up shocked and full of sweat, he frantically found his phone and dialed Xin Haoyue. He needed to promise her safety before he could temporarily be relieved. The phone rang for a long time, but no one picked up. Chen Xinan massaged his temple in irritation and looked at the time. It was 2 a.m, so she must be asleep. Xin Haoyue was woken up by the phone. She was lucky that her phone was turned to vibrate, otherwise how embarrassing would it be if she woke up her colleagues. Maybe it was because Chen Xinan hadn't contacted her for a long time had called. She wondered why he called at this time. She was worried that something had happened, so she went to the door to pick up the call. What's the matter? Chen Xinan originally didn't hold hope that she would answer and wanted to hang up when she answered. Did you sleep yet? Xin Haoyue wanted to worship him. Don't you know that there's a time difference between the two of us? Why don't you look at the time? At this time, if I'm not sleeping, that would be unusual. After she spoke, she didn't hear anything from him. She asked, is there a matter? If not, I'm going to hang up. I'm very tired and there's work tomorrow. Hearing that her tone was normal, Chen Xinan thought that nothing happened. He said, "After I'm done handling the work, I will go to a city to find you." "Why are you going to a city?" Xin Haoyue blurted. "I'm not there." Chen Xinan's tone changed. "Where are you?" Xin Haoyue said the name of this remote mountain area. Then she said, "We need to interview Film Emperor Yang for our next episode. He is shooting his movie here and can't make time out for us. So I came with the program group. After seeing the Film Emperor tomorrow, we will be officially recording the episode the day after." That remote place? Chen Xinan almost immediately thought of his dream. He tried his best to keep his voice steady and reminded, "Please remember to go with your colleagues. Don't get lost." Xin Haoyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I'm not a kid. If there's nothing else, I'm going to hang up. I'm very tired now." The next day Xin Haoyue woke up. She only remembered picking up Chen Xinan's call in the middle of the night. She couldn't recall what they talked about. Thinking that it might not be something important, she didn't try to remember. The hotel Xin Haoyue and them lived in was a distance away from where Film Emperor Yang was filming. While heading over, because the road was overly narrow, they couldn't drive in the mountains. They had to get out of the car and walk over. Xin Haoyue walked halfway and remembered that she left her phone in the car because she only remembered to take her folder. She thought about it and said to the director, "Sorry, I'm going to go back to the car to grab my phone. I'll catch up to you guys immediately." Director was scared that she didn't know her surroundings that well, so it wouldn't be too good to go by herself. He especially asked, "Do you want me to have Xiaohuang come with you?" Xin Haoyue hurriedly said, no need. I'll come back instantly after taking my phone." Director didn't force her either. He admired how independent Xin Haoyue was. He was irritated with how the female colleagues and celebrities that he had worked with in the past had ordered people to do their work for them. Xin Haoyue went back herself, and seeing how quiet her surroundings was, she felt uneasy because there was no one. She subconsciously quickened her pace. The cars of the crew were parked in order. She found her car and unlocked it. She reached and just got her phone when she heard the sound of glass breaking by her side. Xin Haoyue was shocked and hurriedly turned around. But her neck felt the icy cold knife. Her face turned pale, and she looked over to see 4 or 5 men wearing black coats looking sinisterly at her. They held iron sticks or sharp knives in their hands. Xin Haoyue's heart thumped violently. She seamlessly placed her phone towards her back and pressed 110. She never tried this before and couldn't promise that she will succeed. Plus, her only option right now was to calm down and stall the time. She wanted to gain as much time as possible for herself. Xin Haoyue prayed in her heart that the colleagues in the program group will have someone come look for herself after realizing that she hadn't been back for a long time. Maybe she will have a chance to live. Xin Haoyue looked at how unfriendly they were. Her instinct was that she was a goner. Suddenly, she recalled the nightmare she had. At that time, she was surrounded by a group of men wearing black as well. They slashed her time after time. She felt herself dying due to loss of blood, but she couldn't do anything. That feeling of horror, fright, and helplessness all surged her heart suddenly. Xin Haoyue didn't dare to breathe heavily. She carefully glanced at the long knife which was about to sink into her skin. She tried her best to make her voice not tremble as much. "Brother, who are you guys? If you guys want money, I can give it to you guys. Let's not resort to violence and weapons. I'm scared." "Humph, you're quite soft-skinned. What a pity if we really slash your skin." Xin Haoyue heard who the man who had the knife on her neck talked to her in such a rude way. She was frightened that they might rape and kill her. Her heart thumped quickly. "Look at your face. Brother feels bad at looking at how pale your face is. Do you want brother to take care of you?" Seeing how his hand was about to touch her face, Xin Haoyue instinctively tilted her head to the side to avoid it. Then she felt a sting on her neck. A sticky feeling spread. She didn't have time to attend to how deep her wound was. She looked sharply at them and threatened harshly, "I advise you guys to not touch me. Otherwise, my family won't let you guys go." "Ha. Well, I want to see what powers do you, a young girl, have. This is the wilderness and there are no security cameras. Even if we kill you and mutilate your body, then throw it in a valley, who do you think can find you? Who would know that we had done this?" After saying this, the man laughed presumptuously. "Women from the city are stupid like this. Humph, you cannot run away from the law. Do you think that you guys can get away from your crimes in secret? I don't believe that this world doesn't have laws and order." Xin Haoyue responded strictly. "You're right." That man took the knife and patted her face. He said in disdain, "I am the law in this place. You don't accept this? Well, hold it in." "Brother, why are you talking nonsense to that woman? Quickly kill her so we can report back." Someone was rushing him. "Brother, that's right. I'm waiting for the money so I can do drugs. My addiction is taking over again." Xin Haoyue understood the deeper meaning to their words. So they were taking people's money and doing work for them? She hurriedly said, "Before you guys kill me, shouldn't you guys let me die clearly? Who let you guys kill me?" "Heh. Okay. How do you not know who you had offended? Fine, I'll be kind and tell you. The person only said that their surname was Sheng. It's not convenient for us to tell you anything else. If you feel wronged, go tell Yama then. The man suddenly waved the knife and was about to slash her. She agilely ducked and kicked his chest. That man didn't expect this, so he stumbled back a step. He clutched his chest with one of his hands and said, "Stupid slut, I didn't think you know some self-defense. Brothers, go ahead, beat her up." Xin Haoyue was delicate and weak. How could she stand against them? She dodged a few times before she was at a disadvantage. She raised her hand up to block the man's punch. She felt like her hands were numb. She raised her leg and tried to kick the abominable man when he caught her leg and dragged her. Xin Haoyue couldn't struggle free from him. She got dragged a few meters away. Her body rubbed against the rough pebbles and sand. Her back immediately burned with pain. Xin Haoyue fell on the ground and the man immediately surrounded her. They kicked and punched her while they cursed. Xin Haoyue covered her head with her hands. She felt her body aching. "Stupid slut, you dare to kick me? I'll slash you to death." When Xin Haoyue heard this, she opened her eyes in terror. She looked at the sharp knife which was about to land on her. She immediately rolled over, her back facing up. She tried her best to shrink herself into a ball. But the pain she imagined didn't come. Instead, she heard one of the insane rascals letting out a scream. After that, Xin Haoyue felt a thick and broad chest hugging her, then a groan above her head. She wanted to turn around to look at the man's face when she heard him say, "Don't look. Close your eyes. Open them when I tell you to." "Chen Xinan?" Xin Haoyue heard his voice and turned around shockingly. He faintly smiled at her. Her eyes suddenly teared up. "Why are you?" "Don't worry, I'll get rid of them." Xin Haoyue choked with emotions and said, "Be careful. I will be fine." The leader of the group saw a person had suddenly appeared. He yelled, "Someone actually came. Are you not scared of death? Then you can die with her. I'll send you guys to heaven." "Well, it depends if you guys have the ability to." Chen Xinan was quite powerful, having been able to beat the men up despite enduring a slash on the back. Xin Haoyue stood by the side and witnessed the entire disturbing battle. She felt as if her heart was clutched and she forgot how to breathe. When Chen Xinan knelt one knee on the ground and stopped moving for a while, she finally snapped. Chen Xinan felt lucky that he had chosen a dark green shirt. If he had worn white like usual, he would have definitely frightened her. "I'm fine." Chen Xinan fainted after saying this to her, however. Xin Haoyue helped him up, only to realize the stickiness behind his back. She was shocked. A terrible feeling rose in her heart as she looked at the red blood covering the palm of her hand. Her tears couldn't help but fall down her face. "Chen Xinan, don't sleep. Chen Xinan, don't scare me. Chen Xinan, wake up. Sorry. You became harmed because of me." In the original novel, he wouldn't have encountered this scene. He had endured this unnecessary trouble for her. "Chen Xinan, I'll call someone to save you right now. Xin Haoyue dialed 120 with trembling hands. When the other party picked up the call, she wanted to say something, only to realize that she couldn't stop her tears and sobs. "Is it 120? Come quickly. Someone is injured here. We're at..." Xin Haoyue hung up only to realize her tear-stained face. "Chen Xinan, nothing can happen to you. Someone please come, help me," she cried uncontrollably. "Nothing can happen to him. Nothing can happen to him. Nothing must happen to him." After Chen Xinan was brought on the ambulance, the doctor cut open his clothes in order to staunch the blood. Xin Haoyue stared at the long slash wound. The wound was very deep and already badly mangled. They couldn't staunch the blood no matter what. Xin Haoyue was dizzy from looking at it. He had protected her by blocking this slash for her. Right? He knew that if he did that, he would definitely suffer badly. But he still did so no matter what. He didn't even groan when he took the slash for her. She covered her face and cried endlessly. At the hospital, she waited outside the operation room for half an hour. After she calmed down, she called Xin Qiancheng. Even though she told herself not to cry in her heart when she heard Xin Qiancheng's voice and then recalled the life and death situation, she couldn't help but cry. "Brother." Hearing her tone, Xin Qiancheng detected something wrong. "What's the matter?" "Brother, Chen Xinan is in danger. He's at the hospital now. Don't panic, tell me, which hospital?" Xin Haoyue choked with sobs as she said the address. Xin Qiancheng hurriedly said, "I'm going there now. Don't be afraid. Nothing will happen to Chen Xinan." Before he headed out, he had his secretary call Chen Xinan's assistant. Within a few minutes of him arriving at the hospital, Chen Xinan's assistant arrived too. "How's President Chen right now?" Xin Haoyue had been sitting by the bed and staring at Chen Xinan, who was in a coma. She responded in a low voice, "He is temporarily out of danger, but he's just not awake yet." Xin Qiancheng stared at Chen Xinan, then said, "The conditions here are too crude. Let's observe him for a few hours. If he's still not awake, let's immediately transfer hospitals and go back to the city." "Okay," Xin Haoyue quickly nodded. After Chen An rushed over and saw this, after a few moments of silence and staring at Xin Haoyue, he said, "Transfer hospitals for him right now. Assistant Wang, contact Shenzhen City's doctor in charge." "Okay." When Xin Haoyue followed back, she seemed gloomy and down the entire time. After Xin Qiancheng got off the plane, he finally dared to ask her, "What exactly happened?" Xin Haoyue looked out the window. After she explained everything that happened, she continued to say, "If it weren't for him, I would probably be a corpse right now. Brother, I brought harm to him. He didn't need to suffer from this unnecessary trouble. If it weren't for him, I would probably be a corpse right now. Brother, I brought harm to him. He didn't need to suffer from this unnecessary trouble. You don't need to overly blame yourself. Maybe this was meant to happen to him. No. He would be safe the whole time until the end. He didn't need to experience this. Since he would be safe until the end, then you should be more at ease. He will be fine. Xin Haoyue wanted to speak, then stopped again. He was unwilling to say that she was being overly worried. When Xin Haoyue arrived at the hospital, she originally was scared that the elders of Chen family would scold her, but old man Chen just stared meaningfully at her and didn't do anything else. Naturally, he didn't seem that enthusiastic about her. He ignored her presence the entire time. Xin Haoyue sat alone in the hospital's corridors. She waited a few hours but still didn't see Chen Xinan waking up. Xin Jin and the rest of them arrived at the hospital. After chatting a bit with the elders of Chen family, they looked at their daughter. He said in a deep voice, "Even if you wait here, he won't wake up immediately. The doctor said that he is out of danger. He will wake up sooner or later. Xue, don't worry. Let mother take you to check out your injury." Xin Haoyue seemed to have forgotten how her body was full of injuries. When Xin Haoyue advised her to check out her injuries, she was unwilling to leave Chen Xinan at all. Now that she saw that numerous people surrounded him, she seemed to be the one left out. She couldn't help but to raise her head. She stared at Bai Ning in persistence. "Mother, when he wakes up, I want to be with him, okay?" Bai Ning suddenly froze. Then she turned around to look at Xin Jin. His face became gloomy, but he said, "You can do whatever you want, no matter what your decision is, as long as you think you're right, your mother and I will support you." "Father, mother, but I'm afraid." Xin Haoyue's eyes turned red. "I'm scared that after I change the ending, he or I or you guys will experience unnecessary trouble." "Foolish child, life is determined by fate. If we live with a frank and open mind, but still can't avoid the calamity, there's nothing wrong with it. In the end, it's all fate, just like you. It's fate how you came to our side." Bai Ning said this and faintly smiled. There was happiness and sorrow in her smile. Xin Haoyue's eyes flickered and her voice trembled. "Father, mother, you guys, we all know. So child, blessings and calamities come together. It had been like this since ancient times. Since we can't avoid this, let us enjoy the blessings. If you really like him, fight for him. Leave whatever you need to face in the future for the future you." Xin Haoyue was very touched by Bai Ning's words. "Thank you, mother and father." Chen Xinan was unconscious for an entire day and night. He didn't wake up until the next morning. He gradually woke up and wanted to turn his body over before he felt the intense pain on his back. When Chenon saw this, he hurriedly said, "Don't do this to yourself. Lay on your stomach." Chen Xinan tried his best to move his body up. He asked, "Father, why are you here? How could I not be here when you injured yourself like this?" Chen Xinan thought about what happened and couldn't help but raise his voice. He asked, "What about her? Is she okay? Where is she now? Is she more important than your life?" Chenon was unhappy. "More important," he responded. Chenon's face turned gloomy. "I really can't see anything good about her that makes you—" "Everything is good about her." Chen Xinan hastily asked, "Father, is she okay? You just need to take care of yourself." Chen Xinan was worried still. After Chenon left, he sent her a message and asked how her injury was. Xin Haoyue almost immediately rushed towards the hospital after seeing the message. She tried her best to calm down her erratic breathing when she stood in front of his room. There was only one thought in her mind. He woke up safe and sound. He's awake. Xin Haoyue stood there for a long time. When she prepared to knock on the door, she heard a voice not far from here. "Is his room in the front? Are you sure you remembered it correctly?" "Boss, I'm sure President Chen's room is in the front." Then quickly. After Sheng Wenyang said this, she continued to walk. She saw the faint figure standing in the empty corridor was Xin Haoyue. Sheng Wenyang stopped and looked darkly at her. Xin Haoyue stared right back. The two made no movements. In the end, Sheng Wenyang walked towards her. Xin Haoyue placed her hand down and turned around to look at her. Sheng Wenyang crossed her chest with her hands and glanced. She asked, "You still have the guts to come?" "Why wouldn't I?" "Sheng Wenyang, I should be asking you this. Xin Haoyue, do you need me to remind you who Nan took the slash for? Since you know who he took the slash for, you should know who's more important to him. Sheng Wenyang, leave him alone." "What right do you have to order me?" Sheng Wenyang coldly humphed. "Just because he likes me, because I want to be with him forever." "Sheng Wenyang, I don't want to give Chen Xinan to you anymore. From now on, he is mine." Xin Haoyue looked at her and said each word with strength. Sheng Wenyang was shocked by her imposing manner. Right after, she reported, "You think that he will accept your decisions? Xin Haoyue, you're too confident in yourself. If I'm not confident, how could I be with him? I forgot to tell you. When we were in danger, the opponents just wanted to kill us. They told me that they were doing this for a woman with surname Sheng. I am curious what this woman has to do with you." Xin Haoyue said and then continued. He was present at the time, so he heard it clearly as well. "Miss Sheng, do you still want to see him now?" Sheng Wenyang's face changed and she collapsed a bit, leaning against the wall. She was speechless for a moment. Xin Haoyue didn't even spare her a look before she opened the door and walked in. She originally thought that Sheng Wenyang wouldn't have done this because based on her impression of her, she wouldn't do something so heartless. But looking at her expression, she seemed to know something about it. Xin Haoyue knitted her eyebrows. Who was the one controlling this? After hearing the door open, Sheng Wenyang's face turned horrible. She hurriedly walked off, wanting only to find Shi as quickly as she could. She originally thought that Chen Xinan had accidentally gotten injured because Xin Haoyue had went to that remote and desolate place. That didn't seem to be the case. Who wanted to kill them? Sheng Wenyang thought of Shi in the first moment. She had given her a suggestion, but she didn't take it. So she decided to do it on her own? And that quick? Sheng Wenyang felt her blood running cold. She couldn't help but concede defeat against how vicious and merciless she was. After Xin Haoyue closed the door and saw that Sheng Wenyang didn't cause her racket, she couldn't help but lean against the door and sighed. Then she looked at the room and jumped. Why are there so many people in the room? Besides Chen Xinan sitting on the bed, there were Old Man Chen, Chen An, Wang Yinlin, Mao Xiuan, and Ji Yi were all there. There were a few unfamiliar men too. While Xin Haoyue were shocked, she suddenly met Chen Xinan's smiling eyes. Then she suddenly thought of an utterly important question. Did they hear everything that she said? It's best if they didn't. But if they did, then Xin Haoyue suddenly froze. Did she need to be so embarrassing? Unsure how much they heard, Xin Haoyue had no idea what to do. Chen Xinan reached for her and said, "Why aren't you coming over?" Xin Haoyue walked over at a normal pace. Every step she walked, she wanted to cry out in her heart. They must have heard it. Why else was everyone laughing at her? Seeing how she walked in nervously like a shy wife, Chen Xinan teased, "Weren't you quite bold in claiming your possession over me by the door?" Xin Haoyue stared at him in shock. She looked at his smiling eyes. Of course. Shut up! Xin Haoyue didn't think and ordered him. Seeing how embarrassed she was, Chen Xinan laughed and said, "It won't help even if I shut up. After all, everyone has heard already." He continued to say, "I have so many witnesses here. You can't escape this time." Xin Haoyue mumbled, "Who said that I was going to escape?" Hearing how she admitted to him, Chen Xinan was so happy that he wanted to bring her in his arms, but seeing how many people were in the way and present, he held back the urge. Old Man Chen said in an unfriendly tone, "Since you're okay, stay like that." Chen Xinan was in a good mood and was too lazy to argue. "Old man, I didn't even give you a grandson yet. How could I let anything happen to me?" When he finished, he especially asked Xin Haoyue, "Right?" Xin Haoyue secretly rolled her eyes. "What do you mean by right?" Chen An and Wang Yinlin looked at each other, not having any opinions. When Xin Haoyue brought the three elders out in place of Chen Xinan, she bowed at them. She said apologetically, "Grandfather Chen, aunt, and uncle, sorry." The three gave each other a look. Then Wang Yinlin said, "As parents, we will naturally be concerned with our child being injured, but we also know his personality. He will do everything he can to get what he wants, and he won't let someone he treasures be hurt in any way at all. You two have experienced a lot. We are happy that you two are able to be together now. Regarding this matter, let time do its magic. You don't need to blame yourself too much." Xin Haoyue felt her throat choking up with emotions. In the end, she could only thank them. Thank you. Chen Xinan noticed that she was feeling kind of down upon returning. Just when he was about to ask her about it, he heard Zhuangzi say, "Sister-in-law, you're really my idol." "What? Who is this?" Xin Haoyue looked at Chen Xinan. Before he could respond, Zhuangzi responded, "Sister-in-law, I'm Zhuangzhu, Nan's best friend." "Hello." Xin Haoyue nodded and greeted. Zhuangzhu wanted to say something else when Chen Xinan wanted to drive him out. "Can you stop saying nonsense?" Zhuangzhu then realized that Chen Xinan was referring to him. Mao Xiuan smiled and placed his hand on Zhuangzhu's shoulders. "Let's go quickly. Being light bulbs, we are too bright and eye-catching, thus getting in the way of President Chen." It was rare for Zhuangzhu to have the chance to see Xin Haoyue. He didn't even get to tease them, so how could he bear to leave? In the end, Mao Xiuan and Ji Yi had to combine their strengths in order to take Zhuangzhu out of the room. The others who Xin Haoyue didn't know left as well. There were only Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue in the vast room now. Xin Haoyue slightly shifted her gaze, not daring to look straight at him. Chen Xinan smiled and observed her for a while. Then he gradually spoke, "Come over and let me hug you." Xin Haoyue turned around and looked at him. Then she quickened her pace and threw herself in his arms. She was worried that it might hurt the wound on his back, so she tightly wrapped her arms around his neck. Chen Xinan embraced her and buried his head in her shoulders, taking in her faint fragrance. He smiled and said, "After suffering numerous hardships, I finally have you." Chen Xinan embraced her and buried his head in her shoulders, taking in her faint fragrance. He smiled and said, "After suffering numerous hardships, I finally have you." Xin Haoyue left his arms and looked at him. She said, "Can you not be so loquacious now?" Chen Xinan replied, "If I'm not talkative now, when should I be? Honey, do you know that when you said you were mine, When Chen Xinan stopped in the middle of his words, she clearly probed, "What?" I was very happy." Xin Haoyue pursed her lips and said, "Of course you're happy. Chen Xinan, if you dare not to care about your life next time, I will definitely split up with you. Don't worry, there won't be a next time. I won't let you be in danger again. Xin Haoyue just smiled. Then she asked, how's your wound? It hurts a lot, Chen Xinan said and knitted his eyebrows. Did you tug on your wound? Xin Haoyue asked nervously. Sit properly, don't hug me anymore, let me take a look. I won't let you go. Chen Xinan tightened his grip on her. He smiled and said, I will only be better if I get to keep hugging you. How could Xin Haoyue not know that he was being shameless? You will have time in the future. Do you have to feel that hurried? The future is the future. The present is the present. How could you mix them together? Xin Haoyue couldn't help but laugh. Then she teased him. Aren't you angry that I drove away the girls? Chen Xinan knew that she was talking about Sheng Wenyang. He smiled and answered, You're better than the rest. I like you more. Xin Haoyue didn't know how to respond to his smooth words. Oh, if you regret this and blame me in the future, then what happens? Chen Xinan didn't think before responding. Don't worry, I will never regret something that I set my mind to. When he finished, he continued. You just need to take care of yourself. I already have someone investigating this. Let me handle this. My brother did too. Yes, I know. Xin Haoyue thought about it and asked, Do you believe that Sheng Wenyang had done this? Chen Xinan became silent, then replied reasonably. I only believe in evidence. After Xin Haoyue spent the morning in the hospital, she went to tell Gu Tong and Zhong Qin that she wasn't single now when she returned home in the afternoon. Zhong Qin laughed and said, You guys finally got together after all these hardships, but the road to happiness is strewn with setbacks. It is really nice how you guys got together. You have to treasure this. Yes, I will. However, Gu Tong started to turn over old accounts and said, When I first saw you guys, I knew that there wasn't anything pure between you guys. But you wouldn't admit it, saying that you had no relations with him. When Chen Xinan's press conference had come out, I made a bet with myself that you will definitely be with him. How does it seem like now? I won the bet. Xin Haoyue smiled and said, You bet with yourself? What do you get for winning? A very nice reward. Gu Tong smiled and said, If I win, I will pursue Xiaqiao. Xin Haoyue was confused and asked, What does this have to do with whether I am with Chen Xinan or not? I'm too lazy to tell you. Gu Tong said, Well, that's the case. I'll reserve the position for you as the bridesmaid. Remember that your evening gown needs to be the prettiest. Xin Haoyue was straightforward and said, Okay. After Gu Tong hung up, she called Xiaqiao. Did you board the plane? Xiaqiao answered honestly, No. After he finished, he immediately reacted. He asked anxiously, Did something happen to Haoyue? Gu Tong responded, Yes, something happened. Something big, but it's something good. She purposefully paused after saying this. After a while, she responded, She just called me to say that she accepted Chen Xinan. The two harmoniously became a couple. Gu Tong intentionally emphasized, harmoniously became a couple. For a while, Xiaqiao had not responded. Then she continued. Haoyue said that she will be busy taking care of Chen Xinan in the hospital lately, so she won't be back until later. Xiaqiao still didn't reply. Gu Tong continued again. Xiaqiao, if I were you, I wouldn't go to Shenzhen City anymore. Gu Tong finished her words and before hanging up, she heard him say, Thank you, I know. Whether he went to find Xin Haoyue in Shenzhen City or not, she had no idea. But around 8 at night, she received Xiaqiao's call. He asked if she wanted a drink with him and she naturally agreed. But because they were both public figures, they didn't dare to go to bars and places like that. Xiaqiao bought many beers and red wine. When Gu Tong arrived, she saw 2 or 3 empty bottles on the table. She silently sighed and sat down. She casually opened the beer bottle and fiercely gulped. Better to get the pain over with, Xiaqiao sneered. You could tell that I have feelings for her? Yes, since an early time from now, when we were in school. Gu Tong didn't conceal this. What a pity that she pretended to be oblivious, and you weren't willing to confess to her. So I had given someone else a chance because of this? Gu Tong sipped beer and pondered over it before saying, I don't think you should say this. Who would tell anything with love? We could only say that it was the right time. She met him first and was in love with him at first sight. Xiaqiao said helplessly, You're right, Chen Xinan always had this ability. Gu Tong comforted, So why must you make it difficult for yourself? You're very outstanding too. There are many people who like you. No. Xiaqiao waved his hands and said, Let me think clearly. Gu Tong exposed him mercilessly. When you think clearly, there are only 2 results. You either let go so that you can be free or keep on holding on, putting both sides in a difficult position. But Xiaqiao, I think that if you like someone, you should think for them, like me. Xiaqiao shook his head. I understand, but it's very difficult for me to take her out of my heart. I need time. Okay, I will wait for you. Gu Tong looked at her and silently drank the beer. She felt relieved. Xin Haoyue, who had no idea that Xiaqiao had the thought of visiting Shenzhen City, was preparing to bring the thermos bottle upstairs to Chen Xinan. But she was blocked by Sheng Wenyang, who was in the hospital lobby. Let's chat. Xin Haoyue was unwilling to. What is there to chat about between us? The truth. Don't you want to know? Xin Haoyue suddenly thought about it, then asked, Since it's the truth and Chen Xinan is also the victim, why won't you tell the truth in front of him? Sheng Wenyang was silent for a bit. She didn't want to see Chen Xinan because she was scared of seeing Chen Xinan's look of disgust. He definitely misunderstood her and believed that she had found someone to hurt and kill Xin Haoyue. She wanted to see him but didn't want him to misunderstand, saying merciless words. She was scared that he will hurt her more than she did to him. The only person she could find was Xin Haoyue. Shen Wenyang said with persistence, I didn't do that. Who is it then? I temporarily can't tell you who the person is. Xin Haoyue laughed and said, if you can't tell me, why bother telling me the truth? Shen Wenyang, how can I believe you when you won't tell me everything? Whether you believe me or not is up to you. Xin Haoyue, don't blame me for not reminding. Not every one of your enemies would be as calm as me. Xin Haoyue watched as Shen Wenyang left after saying this. She was in deep thought. Just who was behind this? While Chen Xinan was recovering from his injury, Xin Haoyue almost appeared in the hospital every day. Sometimes, she stayed until midnight and Chen Xinan had a driver send her back. Xin Chancheng was against this. He was done settling down a contract and headed for the hospital since it was along the way. The moment he opened the door, he saw his sister lowering her head and meticulously peeling an apple with a knife for Chen Xinan. Meanwhile, he sat by the bed and deeply smiled while looking at her. Cough, cough. Xin Chancheng hinted the two before pushing the door in. Xin Xinan turned around to see it was Xin Chancheng. She was a bit surprised and said, Brother, why are you here? Xin Chancheng said nothing but glanced at Chen Xinan. I came to see how seriously injured he is for you to wake up early in the morning and going to sleep late at night in order to take care of him. Xin Haoyue really had been waking up early to cook different types of soup for Chen Xinan. After he had her soup, he felt like the soup brought over by Chen family wasn't to his taste anymore. All he could think about was drinking the soup she personally made for him. Seeing that he enjoyed it, Xin Haoyue didn't decline. She went along his wishes. Not just soup, but Xin Haoyue satisfied a lot of his desires. For example, he wanted to eat an apple. Without another word, she started to peel an apple with a knife for him. For example, he wanted to take a stroll outside. Xin Haoyue pushed him outside to bask in the sunlight. For example, he must handle a document in his company, but his head hurts while looking over it. He wanted her to read it for him. Xin Haoyue was easy to consult, and she read the dry and dull words for him. The more Chen Xinan listened to her, the more addicted he was to her voice. He would throw her several documents to read every day. Seeing that he was a patient, Xin Haoyue didn't argue with him. So when she heard Xin Chancheng's words, she said, Brother, I don't wake up that early. Xin Chancheng glared at her and replied, Well, you're not embarrassed to say that. Xin Haoyue moved her lips but didn't dare to retort, probably because it seemed like she was on Chen Xinan's side more than his. Xin Chancheng couldn't take this anymore. How could Chen Xinan allow Xin Chancheng to bully his wife? He lazily said, Brother-in-law, Yue is just concerned for me. Don't worry, I won't make her exhausted. Towards his intimate addresses, Xin Haoyue didn't find it strange. Lately, Chen Xinan had been calling her these names in private and frequently. However, Xin Chancheng's face became black as charcoal. Yue, so intimate. Chen Xinan, you did this on purpose? And brother-in-law? Who wants to be your brother-in-law? Xin Chancheng didn't bother to look at Chen Xinan. He said to Xin Haoyue, Aren't you flying back to a city tomorrow morning? Go pack up and leave with me later. Xin Haoyue stared at Chen Xinan and hesitated for a while. Brother, it's still early and I don't have anything to pack. There's still some time left, even if I go back later. You? Xin Chancheng was angered by her. They're not even married yet. How would others view them when they see them stuck together like glue? Step out of the room first. I have some business to discuss with him. Xin Haoyue asked in surprise. What sort of business is this that even I can't listen to? Yes, you can't. Go out first. Oh, Xin Haoyue replied and said to Chen Xinan, I'll peel a pear for you later. Okay, Chen Xinan agreed, in pride. Seeing how he took bites from the apple every now and then, he said in a gloomy voice, I'm only going to say this once. Although the elders of the families don't have any objections, this didn't mean I agree to your relationship. Chen Xinan replied nonchalantly, President Xin, do you think I care about your opinion? Even if you don't care, it'll be rare for you to see a smile from me. Chen Xinan didn't care at all. Whatever. As long as I can marry President Xin's precious sister, right? He purposefully said. Once I have my wife, why would I even care for the hardships? Yet Xin Chancheng dampened his happiness. President Chen, get rid of the young ladies by your side first, then we can talk about marriage. What? If she's in trouble because of you again in the future, despite how deeply in love you guys are, I will do my best to separate the two of you guys. Chen Xinan deepened his gaze. Did Xin Chancheng find something? After he left, Chen Xinan gave Assistant Wang a call. He just got off the call when Xin Haoyue walked in. When my brother left, why do I feel like he was angry? Did you guys fight again? Chen Xinan gestured for her to come closer. Once he held her in his arms, he smiled and said, Do you think I have so much free time to bicker with him? Xin Haoyue raised her head from his arms and smiled. I think you do. Seeing how she smiled happily as if she had her way, Chen Xinan was touched by her. He lowered his head to kiss her. Xin Haoyue lifted her head to take in this gentle to passionate kiss. When she felt a soreness in her neck and wanted to shift her head, Chen Xinan pressed the back of her head against him. Xin Haoyue wanted to struggle, but feared worsening his injury. She hesitated before allowing him to take advantage of her. When he let her go, not only did Xin Haoyue breathe heavily, but she felt a numbness and soreness in her lips and tongue. She lifted her hand to punch his chest. You wanted to eat me, huh? Why'd you kiss me so hard? She said this unintentionally, but he thought there was more to it. I do want to eat you. When can I? Why don't you give me an answer? He was teasing her in public. Xin Haoyue's originally red cheeks burned even more now. Shut up. Okay, it's not hard to make me shut up. You can make me shut up like this. As he said this, Chen Xinan attacked her lips again. When she detected him playing with her tongue, she found a phrase that described him. Pervert. He took advantage of her time after time. Xin Haoyue used her phone to observe her bright red lips. People's imaginations run wild from looking at her. She couldn't help but glare at the person beside her. You're still in the middle of recovering? Can you behave yourself? Chen Xinan said innocently. There's no one else in the world who is as well behaved as me. Every day, he was eager for her, and it didn't help that she was always in his line of sight. At most, he could only hug her. It was the first time he had kissed her after they were together even. If he didn't kiss her some more, it would have been his loss. Why would Xin Haoyue care about his resentful tone? She said, I don't care. I have to go out and meet others, so you have to control yourself in the future. Chen Xinan remained silent for a bit before he said, I'll try. He decided to change the topic. You're going back tomorrow morning? Xin Haoyue nodded. I requested time off for a long time now. I have to go back. Okay. Chen Xinan became silent after this. Xin Haoyue raised her head to observe his expression. He was indeed quite unhappy but not angry. She smiled and threw herself in his arms, saying, When I have time, I'll fly back to visit you. I'd rather not. Concentrate on your work while I concentrate on recovering. When I recover, I'll come over to visit. Xin Haoyue thought about it and asked, What if you miss me, or I miss you? What do we do then? Chen Xinan cupped her face and harshly kissed her. He gloomily said, Hold it in. Xin Haoyue burst into laughter at his expression. After she uncontrollably laughed a bit, Chen Xinan pinched her cheeks and scolded. What an ungrateful girl. Humph. Xin Haoyue proudly humped. I'm not going to argue with you. After Xin Haoyue returned, she went back to work. But she took 3 calls during fixed periods during the day. She just had 2 bites of lunch when Chen Xinan called her to check up. Did you eat yet? I'm eating right now. She listened to him about what he had for lunch before she did the same. While Chen Xinan listened to the dishes she listed, he wanted her to eat more and eat food with more nutrition with a meaningful and sincere tone. I know, President Chen. Just rest and take care of yourself. I can take care of myself. I'm an adult after all. Xin Haoyue beamed with a smile when she heard Chen Xinan's reply. She casually said, I'm going to eat now. I'll call you back later. Xia Chao stood behind him and watched the smile on her face lasting long after the call. He was about to step closer to her when he decided to leave in the opposite direction. He walked towards a desk in another corner. When Chen Xinan recovered halfway, he left the hospital as expected. He returned to the residence and then paid a visit to Xin family's 2 elders, not afraid of tormenting himself with the work. Xin Haoyue received Bai Ning's call around evening. When she found out Chen Xinan had visited her family, she hurriedly called him. Why did you leave the hospital and going to all sorts of places? Chen Xinan smiled and replied, I didn't. It's better to pay a visit to my soon-to-be father-in-law and mother-in-law early on than later on. Xin Haoyue was speechless. Someone please tell her what she could say. After Xin Haoyue hung up, she really thought that this man moved quickly. She wouldn't be able to match his speed in being used to his role. Xin Haoyue hurriedly finished dealing with the work in her hands so that she could make time to fly to Shenzhen City. Who knew that her plan didn't come true since Chen Xinan directly flew to a city the 3rd day he was out of the hospital? He noiselessly gave her a surprise. This night, she got off work around 10 p.m. She returned to her home and noticed something strange the moment she opened the door. Why were the lights on? Xin Haoyue was shocked. Then she suddenly thought of the second person besides her who had the keys to the house. She didn't even have time to take off her heels when she hurriedly ran towards the living room after throwing her bag on the sofa. Who knew that she would have met Chen Xinan, who was walking out of the kitchen? Chen Xinan wore a black coat and held a steaming bowl of noodles in his hands. Xin Haoyue stopped her urge of hugging him. She stood in front of him and asked, Why are you here? Why do you think? Chen Xinan placed the bowl on the table. He just turned around when she wrapped her hands around his neck. She smiled delightfully and said, I know. You must be missing me. I know. You must be missing me. Chen Xinan encircled her waist with one hand and smiled at her. I didn't think you were that shameless before. You don't like it? Xin Haoyue hugged him and stepped on her tippy toes, saying this in his ears. The warm linger of breath made Chen Xinan's body tremble. The two hadn't seen each other for a while. Now that she gently laid in his arms, Chen Xinan was too lazy to control his urge. He raised her chin and stared at her flickering eyes. He lowered his head and firmly kissed her. Tongues danced with each other, and Xin Haoyue didn't evade his touch. Instead, she tried to meet the same level as passion as him. In the end, Chen Xinan was worried that this might go out of hand, so he forcibly stopped himself from kissing her addicting lips. While they were panting, his fingers caressed her bright red and moist lips. He said with a hoarse voice, "You're gorgeous." Xin Haoyue felt the sight in front of her was blurry. She stared at him dizzily. Chen Xinan gulped and kissed her again. When Xin Haoyue finally had time to eat the noodles, she felt her lips were still numb. She had a bite and complained, "Can you kiss me softly in the future?" This question. Chen Xinan looked at her calmly and corrected, "I am a normal man." "I didn't say you weren't." "What?" Xin Haoyue welcomed his observing gaze and blushed. She hurriedly stopped this topic. She strangely thought, why is she thinking about scenes unsuitable for children when they were talking about this? Xin Haoyue buried herself in the noodles in order to conceal her wild imagination. When she finished, Chen Xinan asked to wash the dishes and wanted her to shower. Xin Haoyue was pleased with this decision. She hummed a song while walking to the bedroom. Once she was done with shower, she just realized that he entered the bathroom as well. Right now, he was sitting by the bed with his legs crossed and looking at the poetry entries by the bedside. Chen Xinan looked towards the bathroom door when he heard the sound of the door opening. She just finished showering and pulled her hair up in a ponytail, wearing pink fluffy pajamas. She covered herself completely. Chen Xinan smiled meaningfully and asked, "Are you scared of me doing something inappropriate to you?" "What?" Seeing that his gaze was on her pajamas, she knew that he misunderstood. She hurriedly explained, No. Evenings in a city are very cold. Even with the heater on, I'm still very cold, so I'm just used to wearing warm clothes before sleeping." Chen Xinan knitted his eyebrows and asked, "Fear the cold?" "Yup." Xin Haoyue thought it may be a genetic problem. Despite how much she trained her body and drank Chinese medicine in order to recuperate, the result wasn't as effective. Chen Xinan waved her over. Xin Haoyue buried herself in his arms and took in his warmth. She was very comfortable and asked him, "How long will you be in a city for? How long do you want me to stay for?" Chen Xinan threw the question back at her. Xin Haoyue knitted her eyebrows and thought seriously. She responded, What? I don't know how to explain." Xin Haoyue smiled and kissed his chin. "Let's live in the moment." "Oh?" Chen Xinan smiled and said, "Then, shouldn't I do something in order to make the most out of this evening and rare chance?" Xin Haoyue hurriedly let go of him. "Don't try to do anything." "What are you going to do if I mess around?" "Ah, let me go. Stop messing with me. Stop messing. I didn't even get to see your wound. Let me see it." Chen Xinan pressed her down and looked at her blushing face. "There's nothing to see. I want to see." Unable to change her mind, Chen Xinan took off his shirt. When Xin Haoyue saw the long zigzag but sinister wound on his back, she couldn't help but caress it. "Does it still hurt?" Chen Xinan turned around to see her eyes turning slightly red. He hurriedly responded, "When I was injured at that time, it didn't hurt. It doesn't hurt now either. It had mostly recovered already." Xin Haoyue burst into laughter and said, "Chen Xinan, you really think you're made from metal?" He even believes that he's invulnerable and untouchable. "Even if I'm not made from metal, I think I'm about to be an immortal." Looking at his deep gaze, Xin Haoyue understood the meaning of his words. She secretly said, hopefully she was overthinking. During the evening, Chen Xinan, who had mysophobia, persisted and refused to sleeping in the guest room. Besides the fact no one had cleaned the room, Xin Chanchen had lived there before. Xin Haoyue couldn't understand him. "You can't live there because my brother lived there?" "No." "Chen Xinan, don't you think you're immature?" Chen Xinan had a gloomy face. Xin Haoyue continued to tease him, not afraid of the consequences. "Sometimes, I think you and my brother are more of a couple than us. You guys like to fight and bicker, but if you guys are together, who's on top and who's on bottom?" Xin Haoyue, who rambled on and talked nonsense, was pressed under Chen Xinan. After bullying her to the point of tears and her begging for mercy, Chen Xinan said in a cool tone, "Even if I'm on top, you are my only target." Xin Haoyue, who was still panting, was speechless. She wouldn't dare to fantasize about him and other people in the future anymore, okay? That night, Chen Xinan forcibly allowed himself to sleep in the main bedroom with her, disregarding protests. The next day, Xin Haoyue woke up. She returned around to see Chen Xinan's handsome face, not even a few centimeters from her. She couldn't help but immerse herself in his looks. When it seemed like he was about to wake up, she got out of bed to rinse. Xin Haoyue had to go to work. After Chen Xinan dropped her off at the TV station, he asked her out for lunch. Xin Haoyue naturally agreed. After telling him when she approximately would get off work, she smiled and waved him goodbye. She was in a beautiful mood because of this. When she got off work in the evening, Chen Xinan specially went to pick her up. Halfway, the two decided to shop for groceries to cook dinner. Xin Haoyue asked him, "What do you like to eat?" Chen Xinan asked, "What do you like?" Xin Haoyue casually said a few of her all-time favorite dishes. Chen Xinan nodded. "Then I'll cook these dishes tonight for now." He then lowered his head and concentrated on choosing the ingredients. Xin Haoyue was flabbergasted. Did that mean he was going to cook tonight? Xin Haoyue was a bit excited in her heart. She held onto his arm and smiled. "I didn't know you knew how to cook." Chen Xinan was proud when she mentioned this. "Earning money can't even stump me. Why do you think buying things will?" Xin Haoyue smiled even more sweetly. He was Chen Xinan, who was graceful at work and diligent in the kitchen. Of course, Xin Haoyue had too many expectations. Looking at the normal dishes, Xin Haoyue tasted it. Although it wasn't unpalatable, it wasn't as great as her cooking. But she witnessed his step-by-step process of cooking personally. Accordingly, Chen Xinan was above average for displaying this result from his first time in cooking. How is it? Seeing that she was biting her chopsticks and deep in thought, he couldn't help but ask. Xin Haoyue said truthfully, "There's a lot of room for improvement." Chen Xinan rolled his eyes at her. He would only drop his honor for her. Yet, she disliked his cooking. 4 days after Chen Xinan lived in a city, because of important matters in the company, he had no choice but to leave. After Xin Haoyue received his call, although she was in a mellow mood, she quickly recovered. "Okay, take care of yourself." Chen Xinan laughed and asked back, "I realize that, ever since we're together, you're especially worried for my body. How about we find a time to test this so you would stop worrying?" Once Xin Haoyue heard this, her face turned red immediately. "Who cares? Goodbye." She hurriedly hung up on him. Chen Xinan took her kindness for granted. She was worried about his wound, not his body. Because the two worked in different places, they saw each other up to 4 or 5 times a month only. Although they wished to see one another at times, they placed work as their priority and controlled their urges. When it was near Chinese New Year, Xin Haoyue started to go on break. When she arrived in Shenzhen City, it was already the 28th of December. Xin Haoyue's luggage was simple. She only had a black backpack. But when she came out of their airport, it was coincidentally pouring in the city. The pouring rain in this icy cold weather made the surroundings look bizarre. She didn't bring an umbrella. She originally wanted to hail a taxi when the rain got smaller, but she suddenly saw Chen Xinan and Mao Xiuan walking over shoulder to shoulder, not far from here. Mao Xiuan was confused why Chen Xinan suddenly stopped. He instinctively looked at him and realized that he was gazing in a direction through his sunglasses. Mao Xiuan looked in his direction and surprisingly noticed. "Hey, Xin Haoyue?" Almost immediately after he said this, he looked at Chen Xinan. He smiled happily and said, "No wonder you wanted to rush back here no matter what. It seems like you have a date with her." Chen Xinan originally just wanted to try their luck. If he had good luck, their planes might have arrived at the same time. It seems like that was really the case. Xin Haoyue was incredibly surprised too. They could even meet under these circumstances? She couldn't attend to Mao Xiuan. She said to Chen Xinan, "Didn't you say you won't be back until the afternoon?" There was a collaboration in Chen Xinan's company. He went abroad to settle the matter for numerous days already. "Yes, I came back yesterday night." He patted her head and continued, "I'll bring you back." "Okay." Xin Haoyue had been waiting for this. Mao Xiuan left discreetly after hearing this. It's better if he wisely avoided them so that they won't torture a single person like him with PDA. Chen Xinan didn't bring an umbrella either. Despite him taking off his jacket and covering her, she was still wet. Seeing that her shoulders were wet, Chen Xinan said, "I'll bring you home so you can take a shower first." Xin Haoyue didn't think much about it. She originally was going to tell Chen Xinan that she was going home after getting in the car. But when the car stopped under his neighborhood, she was confused. "Why are we here?" Chen Xinan, who was unbuckling his seatbelt, indicated her wet clothes. "Change first, then we can go back." Xin Haoyue was dumbstruck. She didn't bring any clothes in her backpack. Xin Haoyue felt like there was something behind Chen Xinan's actions. Before she could think too much about it, she followed him up the stairs in a daze. When he unlocked the door, Xin Haoyue just realized. Could it be because he hadn't seen her for a long time, so he couldn't bear to let her go back? The moment this idea flashed by her head, the door opened. After Chen Xinan took a few steps in, he looked deeply at her for 2 to 3 seconds. She was about to talk when Chen Xinan pulled her in the house. Xin Haoyue made a single noise when she suddenly realized that she was pressed against the wall. He held her waist with one hand and her thigh with the other, making her wrap her legs around his waist. He lowered his head and kissed her without a single care in the world. It felt like he was about to tear her apart and swallow her. Xin Haoyue raised her head to take in his deep kiss, until she felt difficulty with breathing and her left leg also felt numb. She then punched his chest lightly. She protested incoherently. Chen Xinan stopped unwillingly, seeing her red face. While Xin Haoyue was panting, she felt his hand on her thighs still. She struggled and wanted to get off him, but Chen Xinan didn't let go. She softly said, "My leg is sore." Chen Xinan carried her to a sofa after hearing this. The black sofa in his house was huge and had a lot of space. After Xin Haoyue sat down, she couldn't help but to lay back and then roll a few times. But for her reputation, she held it in. Her legs were numb and she trembled. She looked up to see Chen Xinan staring at her. She moved back, feeling guilty. She asked, "Why did you want me here?" "To change clothes," Chen Xinan said while taking off her white coat for her. Xin Haoyue wanted to stop him, but he was too quick. She hurriedly said, "I didn't bring any clothes." She lacked nothing at home, so she naturally wouldn't bring clothes back and forth. Chen Xinan stood up and took off his jacket. He indicated the bedroom and said, "There are clothes in the main bedroom. You can go grab it. It's best if you take a warm shower." "Heh, shower. I think I don't need to take a shower." Chen Xinan stopped what he was doing and looked deeply at her. Aren't you afraid of a cold? Are you planning for me to help you take a shower? Xin Haoyue raised her hand to admit defeat. I'll go take one. Okay? Chen Xinan looked at her. Or do you want to do something else? Xin Haoyue's face turned red and hurriedly explained herself. I wasn't thinking about anything, but your gaze proved to me that you were thinking about a lot of things. I didn't. Leave me alone. I'm going to change my clothes. As she said this, she stood up and pushed Chen Xinan. He didn't make it difficult for her either, cooperating and moving to the side. Xin Haoyue walked into the main bedroom to see that his room was quite neat. There was a gray bed and a dressing table. There was a liquid crystal TV and a black office desk by the corner. The documents on the desk were neatly displayed too. After Xin Haoyue looked around the surroundings, besides the linked bathroom and study in the bedroom, there was another room. She opened the door to see another heaven. The clothes were neatly hung in the closet. The clothes, shoes, watches, and such were sorted and placed in order. Besides noticing his shirts and suits, Xin Haoyue also saw the closet full of women's clothes. There were clothes from all sorts of seasons. She was incredibly shocked. She looked through the sizes to see it was all her normal sizes. There were even pajamas and her undergarments. Xin Haoyue placed her hand on her forehead. When did he prepare all of this? How come she didn't know? Plus, it seems like he was planning to live with her. But he never requested this. The two lived in separate places and each had their own jobs. It was difficult to live together. Xin Haoyue took a warm shower with a complicated feeling in her heart. She changed to casual clothes, and the moment she opened the door, she saw that he changed as well. Xin Haoyue looked at him but didn't do or say anything. Chen Xinan walked closer to her and held her eyes. She noticed that her hands finally got warmer after the warm shower. It wasn't as icy as it was when she first got in the house. He asked her, do you want to wait until the rain stops, then go back, or right now? Xin Haoyue knew that her family would start to worry if she didn't go back. But she wanted to spend an extra few minutes with her. Therefore, she thought about it before she answered, I'm going to call my mother. She didn't need to say anything more for him to understand. Chen Xinan pinched her face and nodded. Okay. Xin Haoyue happily wanted to retrieve her phone from the living room. She only walked a few steps when he carried her princess style. She was frantic and hurriedly wrapped her arms around his neck. What are you doing? Chen Xinan looked at her pale white feet and said, even if there are carpets on the ground, you can't walk barefoot around. Although Xin Haoyue knew that he was concerned for her, she purposefully didn't want him to have his way. Oh, I didn't know there are so many rules in your house. Xin Haoyue, don't you think you're quite ungrateful saying this? Xin Haoyue smiled and shook her head. I don't think so. Humph? Chen Xinan coldly humphed. She thinks he can't punish her? He lowered his head to kiss her again. Xin Haoyue hurriedly reminded him out of fright. Watch where you're going. Xin Haoyue stayed in his house for a few hours. The two cuddled on the sofa and watched an old movie. When the movie finally ended and the rain stopped, Xin Haoyue looked at the time. She looked down and said, I should go. Okay. Chen Xinan knew that her break wasn't that long. If she didn't go home anytime soon, Xin family would probably have some objections to him. On the way back, Chen Xinan asked, do you have time tomorrow? Xin Haoyue thought carefully and said truthfully, it's hard to tell. Chen Xinan knew that it was the Chinese New Year, so she might have to stay with her family. He settled for the next best. How about the day after? The 1st of January? I don't think so. How about your family? Chen Xinan continued to ask. What? Xin Haoyue was confused. Invite the two families' elders out for lunch and talk about our marriage. Xin Haoyue felt like she couldn't keep up with him. They weren't even together for a while yet. He was already thinking about marriage? Xin Haoyue pondered over her word choices and asked, don't you think we're a bit too quick? I had been waiting for you for so many years. If we married the moment you graduated from college, we would have a child by now. Xin Haoyue was frightened by his thoughts. She hastily rejected. It's too quick. You will scare my parents like this. It's not quick. I went to visit my soon-to-be father-in-law and mother-in-law before and hinted them. Chen Xinan said and looked at her, continuing. Plus, it doesn't seem like they were against the idea. Xin Haoyue clenched her teeth and said, are you marrying me or my parents? They don't have any opinions, but I do. What's your opinion? We're too quick. We're only at the dating stage and you already want to marry me? Chen Xinan thought deeply. His slender fingers tapped against the keyboard every now and then. Seeing this, Xin Haoyue hovered over him and hugged his arms. She tried to please him. It's too quick. I'm not mentally ready yet. Chen Xinan looked at her and agreed in the end. Then let's slow down? Xin Haoyue looked gratefully at him. She instinctively kissed his face and said, you're great. Seeing that she was trying to please him, he was in a great mood. On the 1st day of January, Chen Xinan was busy welcoming and attending to the relatives and friends coming over. Of course, he had many business partners as well. Although Xin Haoyue wasn't as busy as him, she and Zhongqin went on a date the whole day. After the two left the beauty salon, they went on a crazy shopping spree. After shopping and eating, they went to the theaters to watch a movie like how couples would. Seeing the couples online that were in front of them, Zhongqin sighed. I feel attacked at such a young age by them. This is unnatural. Xin Haoyue laughed. Didn't you want to come and watch a movie? Zhongqin sighed. If you can be a guy, I will probably be happy. Xin Haoyue shrugged. I really can't help you there. Seeing that you ditched Chen Xinan and stayed with me the entire day on the 1st of January, I won't argue with you. Xin Haoyue chuckled. Thank you, Miss Zhong, for not arguing with me then. My pleasure, my pleasure. Zhongqin waved her hands as if she was acting. Xin Haoyue smiled and said, I think you don't need to be a host. You can go ahead and be an actress. Maybe you can get an award. Sigh. I had been thinking about this. But I'm not that famous, so I didn't dare to change my career. Zhongqin rambled on. Xin Haoyue detected a man in a suit watching her not far from Zhongqin. Xin Haoyue looked at him and he stared back. He didn't even avoid her. This man was handsome, but Xin Haoyue knew for sure that she didn't know him. Zhongqin knew something was wrong too. She looked over according to her gaze. She noticed Mo Bei with another girl. She was smiling and talking to him, but Mo Bei seemed indifferent. Zhongqin whispered and asked Xin Haoyue, Do you know him? Xin Haoyue shook her head, but she felt like he knew her. That man wearing a gray suit is Mo family's grandson. What was a coincidence was that he was like Sheng Wenyang, also in the designer industry. Oh right, he is Mo Bei. Zhongqin said this and asked her, Have you heard of him? Mo Bei? Xin Haoyue slightly squinted her eyes. So it's him. He was the second male lead in the book. He liked Sheng Wenyang to the point he would sacrifice anything for her, and he had lost himself in the process. Yet, he was with another girl at this time? Did he listen to the elders and was going on a blind date? Xin Haoyue suddenly remembered that Mo Bei and Chen Xinan had known each other since they were kids. But because of Sheng Wenyang, they became strangers in the end. So Mo Bei had been staring at her because he knew she was Chen Xinan's woman? He was curious. On the way back, she called Chen Xinan to tell him how she coincidentally met Mo Bei. Then, she naturally thought of another question. Wasn't Sheng Wenyang being too quiet recently? Why aren't there any news of her? Because she had been busy, she forgot to ask Xin Chanchang and Chen Xinan how the investigation had been going. They had no information on the person behind this at all? It seems like they have a lot of experience, so that they were able to leave no traces at all. After Chen Xinan picked up Xin Haoyue, he brought her to his apartment. Chen Xinan's decision to not bring her out in public matched Xin Haoyue's thoughts perfectly. She doesn't like the feeling of brushing against other people's shoulders, just like how she had walked in the crowd today with Zhongqin to shop. There were crowds wherever they went. Xin Haoyue was already acquainted with Chen Xinan's apartment because she had visited it before. The moment Chen Xinan opened the door, she walked past him to get inside first. As she bent over to take off her boots, she asked with a smile, So, President Chen, are you planning to prepare the dinner tonight by yourself? Chen Xinan only knew that Xin Haoyue was talented when it came to making soup, but he didn't know that she was also skilled at cooking. When he heard her question, he thought, She doesn't know how to cook, but one of them needed to know since the two of them were going to be living together. When he thought about it that way, he took off his black long windbreaker and rolled up his gray-lined sleeve and said, Let me do it. Xin Haoyue was amused by his expression that showed facing death fearlessly, so she said, You're only cooking. It's not like you're going on the battlefield. Do you need to be this serious? If you can do it, then you go do it. Xin Haoyue responded smilingly as she took off her coat. I can't. It's all on you, President Chen. Chen Xinan moved his brows subtly and stared at her silently. Xin Haoyue suddenly felt that something was wrong, so she touched her face and said, Is there anything on my face? Yes, Chen Xinan said in a serious tone. Upon hearing his words, she went looking for the mirror inside her bag. I saw 4 words written on your face. Chen Xinan walked closer to her and pointed at her forehead. Rejoicing in other people's misfortune. Xin Haoyue burst out laughing. Yes, President Chen, I'm in the wrong. You're a person of high moral character. Please don't make it difficult for someone like me. Chen Xinan lifted his chin subtly. So how are you going to make up for it? Xin Haoyue rolled her pretty eyes. Why don't you punish me with cooking tonight? Chen Xinan nodded and said, Don't bomb the kitchen. Xin Haoyue pretended to be angry. Chen Xinan, don't underestimate people. Chen Xinan pretended that he didn't see her angry face and said to himself, But it's fine if you bomb the kitchen. There's another one next door. Next door? Xin Haoyue then thought of the reselling of her apartment next door. She bought that apartment, but then resold it not long after her purchase. Then Xin Chancheng handled all of the details of the sale, so she doesn't know who the buyer was. Oh right, who's living next door? Chen Xinan narrowed his eyes and looked at her. You don't know? Xin Haoyue shook her head honestly. No, my brother told me that he found a buyer, so I moved out right away. I didn't ask about it afterwards. After she finished the sentence, she looked at Chen Xinan with an ill-intentioned expression. President Chen, the new neighbor must be better than me, the old neighbor, isn't that right? Chen Xinan sat down on the couch and stretched out his long legs and said lazily, It is indeed much better. Oh, then it must be a beauty? Xin Haoyue cooperated. Indeed beautiful. As Chen Xinan's voice trailed off, his handsome face was attacked by the pillow Xin Haoyue threw. Xin Haoyue, Chen Xinan threw the pillow away and was about to unleash his anger when Xin Haoyue pounced on him. She pulled on the collar of his shirt and said, "No wonder you like it here so much. It's because there's a secret mistress next door." Chen Xinan stretched out his hands to stop her, but when he looked down, he realized that Xin Haoyue was straddling his waist while kneeling on the sofa. Chen Xinan stretched out his hands to stop her, but when he looked down, he realized that Xin Haoyue was straddling his waist while kneeling on the sofa. He moved, and she also moved along with his movement. Their lower bodies rubbed against each other with the movement. Chen Xinan felt the fire lighting up inside him. His breathing became a little heavy as he stared at her carefully. "Do you believe that I will take care of you if you move again?" After Xin Haoyue heard the threat, she froze for a moment and then quickly got off of him. But her careless movements sparked an accidental conflict. She touched the part where she wasn't supposed to touch. Xin Haoyue's face was suddenly filled with embarrassment. She explained, "I didn't do it on purpose. I'll..." Not waiting for her to finish, Chen Xinan positioned her under his body. "I think you did it on purpose." Xin Haoyue was speechless. Woo-woo. She really didn't mean to. All of Chen Xinan's suppressed desire was suddenly unleashed by that accidental touch. Even if he couldn't unleash all of it, at least he should receive some interest back. Xin Haoyue was trapped on the couch by Hai. Her lips were numb from his kissing. She felt that he was sucking on her lips extra hard, so she couldn't help but pushed him away. "Don't kiss too hard. I need to go home later." When she called home, she told them that she won't be home for dinner because she has a date with Chen Xinan. Xin Chancheng said, "You must be back by 10 o'clock. That meant that she couldn't stay for the night. If he kissed too much, how will she face her family? Chen Xinan's expression darkened when he asked, "So it's fine as long as no one sees it?" Eh? Xin Haoyue's brain lacked oxygen as she looked at him in confusion. Chen Xinan smiled and then pulled down her collar. She wore a red V-neck sweater, so it was very convenient for him to pull the collar to her shoulder. She noticed that the skin around her neck had turned cold from being exposed, but in the next second, warmth was immediately returned to her neck. Chen Xinan lowered and buried his head on her shoulder, kissing the area from her neck to her shoulder. Sometimes he sucked her skin with a great force, leaving behind red marks. Xin Haoyue tilted her head and clutched the couch tightly with both of her hands. Her body felt soft and boneless. She felt like her body wasn't her body. Her skin was smooth and fair. One of Chen Xinan's hands cupped her softness while his other hand slid inside her clothes. It was unknown how much time had passed, but Xin Haoyue began to slowly recover her consciousness. When she slowly opened her eyes, she saw the beast in front of her putting on her clothes for her. Not only did he take off his shirt, he also took off hers. He then wrapped her in his embrace and rubbed against her with all his strength. When Xin Haoyue reflected back to some of the scenes, she couldn't help but complain. "What's the difference between your behavior and..." It was obvious that her voice became quieter in the latter part of the sentence. Chen Xinan, who was bent over picking her clothes, stopped. He didn't immediately hand her the clothes right away. Instead, he began fiddling around with her clothes as he jokingly said, "You don't think there's a difference between entering and not entering? You?" Xin Haoyue suddenly thought that she had previously underestimated his shamelessness. Since she couldn't outwit him by talking, Xin Haoyue sulkingly said, "Give my clothes back. If you want to get your clothes back, say something to make me happy." Xin Haoyue's chest was only covered by his black windbreaker, so her back was freezing. She bit her lip, unwilling to let him push his luck. So she rolled her eyeballs and sneezed twice. Upon seeing the scene, Chen Xinan immediately asked, "You caught a cold?" Xin Haoyue used the opportunity to make a fuss. "Who told you to take off my clothes?" Chen Xinan quickly helped her put the clothes on, changed a thicker one later. "This is too thin, no wonder you caught a cold." Xin Haoyue rolled her eyes. "Why didn't you thought of that when you took my clothes off?" After she finished wearing her outfit, Chen Xinan directly put on his black windbreaker on her. "Don't take it off, put your coat on too." Xin Haoyue wanted to laugh. "President Chen, I'm still inside the apartment. It's the same inside the room." Xin Haoyue didn't want to talk to him. Chen Xinan pinched into his own pocket and took out a red envelope for her. Xin Haoyue didn't accept it right away. Instead, she asked, "Is this used to bribe me?" "I don't really see which part of you is worthy enough for me to bribe." Chen Xinan immediately exposed her. Xin Haoyue became angry. "Then what do you mean by giving me this? Red packet for New Year. Didn't you just send me one last night?" Xin Haoyue replied without thinking. "That wasn't the same. This is real deal." "Oh." Xin Haoyue received the red envelope over from Chen Xinan. She shook the envelope. It wasn't money inside, so she asked, "What did you put inside?" "Don't you know how to open it?" Chen Xinan raised an eyebrow. "Open it in front of you?" Xin Haoyue thought about it and said, "I'll open it now." There was only a card inside the red packet when she opened it. Xin Haoyue didn't understand. "You're so rich that you give out cards when giving out red packets? You think everyone else receives the same treatment?" Xin Haoyue laughed. "That's true. I'm not the same." Then she asked, "How much money is in this card?" Chen Xinan was not the kind of person to care how many zeros are in his bank account, so he only replied, "Check it out yourself." If Chen Xinan had given a red packet with money, she would have reluctantly accepted it. But now that he gave her a card with an unknown balance, Xin Haoyue felt a little apprehensive. Why did you thought of giving me this all of a sudden? It was a little fishy for her to accept it. Chen Xinan reached out to pinch her cheek. Accept it. This is to wish that you will have a child soon. Xinxia. Why does she like she was fallen into a trap? But then she thought, since he gave it to her, she won't reject it unreasonably. The two began to cook after she put the card away. Chen Xinan stood on the sideline as he watched her skillfully wash, chop, and cook the food. She had down everything in a clear and orderly manner, showing no signs of nervousness that she was doing everything for the first time. He said, I never knew you were skilled at cooking. Xin Haoyue smiled proudly. There's a lot of stuff that I'm skilled at. Chen Xinan smiled. What else? Let me hear about them. While Xin Haoyue was stir-frying the food, she replied proudly, I'm not telling you. Chen Xinan was indifferent. That's even better. I like to discover them myself. Xin Haoyue looked to him without saying anything. After dinner, Chen Xinan asked her to play chess. Xin Haoyue wasn't skilled at playing chess, so she lost very badly. Xin Haoyue acted shamelessly. Why can't you be a gentleman and humor me? The result would be the same. That was the truth. He humored her half of the game, and she still lost gloriously. The two of them were lovey-dovey for a bit after chess until Chen Xinan received a call from Zhuangzhu asking him to drink with them. I'm busy, not going. Chen Xinan answered without hesitation. Zhuangzhu said with discontent. What is there to busy with on New Year? Chen Xinan looked at Xin Haoyue and reached out to hug her. I need to accompany my wife. Zhuangzhu was unwilling to accept the defeat of not being able to invite Chen Xinan out on New Year. As a result, he kept calling Chen Xinan to harass him. Come out. We will treat you. Your wife is not with you today. Come out to drink. Chen Xinan, I brought enough cash today. Come and play mahjong with us. Chen Xinan heard these words when he picked up the phone. So he turned to ask Xin Haoyue. Zhuangzhu is going to give us free money. Shall we meet him? What? Xin Haoyue was going back to City A tomorrow. She thought of Zhuangzhu's callback in New Year asking Chen Xinan to go out with him while they were together. And today Zhuangzhu was asking him out again during their limited time together? Xin Haoyue tilted her head to examine Chen Xinan. The faint sunlight projected through the black glass window gave Chen Xinan a warm glow. Chen Xinan's gaze fell on her clean and makeup-free face. He watched her rosy lips move. Chen Xinan, I realize that your Zhuangzhu likes to stick with you a lot. He sticks to you even more than me, your official girlfriend. After she finished speaking, she squinted her eyes at Chen Xinan and said, Are the two of you? Halfway through her sentence, she realized that the expression on Chen Xinan's face had darkened, so she quickly corrected herself. Oh no, does Zhuangzhu have any feelings towards you? Chen Xinan looked at her deeply and then pulled her into his embrace. He smiled and said, Do I need to prove it to you that your boyfriend has no problem at all? After he finished speaking, he lowered his head and sucked hard on the hollow of her neck. Xin Haoyue pushed him away with great force. No, don't. I'm in the wrong. I was joking, all right? She lowered her head and quickly fixed her collar. Chen Xinan let go of her, but he continued to rub her palm with his right hand. He lazily said, He's probably interested in you. Xin Haoyue didn't understand. I only saw him once. What is he interested in? Chen Xinan said indifferently. Because you guys only met once, that's why he's interested. Xin Haoyue thought about it and came to the conclusion that a huge part of Zhuangzhu's interest probably came from Chen Xinan. Thinking of it that way, she said smilingly, How about we go over tonight? Upon seeing that she had no complaints, Chen Xinan agreed. But while he called Zhuangzhu to tell him that he will be attending tonight's meeting, he also said something inadvertently. Remember to gather everyone. It was easier to introduce his girlfriend to all his friends at once. When Zhuangzhu heard that Chen Xinan was finally going to show his face along with Xin Haoyue, he immediately gathered the rich people whom they always hang out with. Mo Bei was included in that group, obviously. When Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue arrived, Zhuangzhu and his friends were already high. The scent of beer and smoke were mixed in the private room, and the music was blasting loudly. Although Xin Haoyue frowned for a moment when she arrived in the room, thanks to how spacious the room was and the good ventilation, she quickly got used to it. However, Chen Xinan, who had his arm around her waist, had noticed her subtle change in expression when he glanced at her. He turned to look at the glass table was littered with bottles of beer. Although there weren't any beautiful women accompanying the men, the atmosphere here was still foul. Chen Xinan stood outside and didn't enter. He told Zhuangzhu to open another room next door. Zhuangzhu was shocked. Bro, we already cleaned up the room when we knew that you're coming. We still need to change. Chen Xinan had mysophobia, so he always does the same thing, even when he only stayed for half an hour. But how was this different from the past? When Zhuangzhu came in before, he told them to pay attention to their cleanliness, but he didn't expect that this still wasn't up to Chen Xinan's standard. It wasn't supposed to turn out this way. Chen Xinan ignored his expression and said, Switch to another room. Zhuangzhu couldn't do anything, so he could only tell his bros to move. It was rare for Chen Xinan to gather with them, and this was the first time he brought a woman with him. They had indulged in his grand press conference for a couple of days. Now that they met the real person, they realized that she was still beautiful even without makeup. As a result, they kept flattering him, saying that his luck with women was very good. Xin Haoyue only smiled faintly from the sideline. She would occasionally nod her head and reply with a few words here and there. Chen Xinan was originally worried that she would feel uncomfortable, but he was relieved after he saw how calmly and at ease she was handling the whole situation. Zhuangzhu was the best at talking. He kept calling her sister-in-law. When the others saw this, they also took the opportunity to address her as their sister-in-law. Xin Haoyue sat in the middle of the crowd. She lowered her head and whispered to Chen Xinan, "Are you older than all of them?" "I'm older than some of them. What's the matter?" Chen Xinan was worried that she felt uncomfortable. It turned out to be that Xin Haoyue really was uncomfortable. Being called sister-in-law by so many men feels very special. Chen Xinan reached out his hand to soothe the back of her hair, then said smilingly, "It will become better after you get used to it." After the waiter finished serving the food and everyone was ready to take a seat, the door of the room was pushed open, and the figure of a man and woman came into view. The man was wearing a black leather jacket. He was tall and handsome. The woman had on a light blue overcoat and was wearing a white dress inside. Her makeup was exquisitely applied, and her hair was loosely draped over her shoulders, giving her a beautiful feminine appearance. When Xin Haoyue saw their faces, her mouth curved into a faint but beautiful smile. Mo Bei and Shen Wenyang? Everyone was shocked that Mo Bei had also brought a woman over. When they got a closer look at the woman, they realized that she was the one who had a catfight with Chen Xinan's woman. The most important point was that the two women had a catfight because of Chen Xinan. Everyone wanted to applaud, but they forced themselves to suppress their desire. Their faces showed no signs of excitement as their gaze switched back and forth between the two parties. Everyone, let's not be too presumptuous. It's not a smart thing to provoke Chen Xinan or Mo Bei. Zhuangzhu was the one who had contacted Mo Bei. Mo Bei told him that he was busy, and Mo Bei was contacted by Zhuangzhu, but Mo Bei told him that he was busy, and he will see by then. As a result, Zhuangzhu wasn't bothered too much by Mo Bei's absence, but why does he have to bring this woman along? Zhuangzhu looked at Xin Haoyue worriedly, but he was surprised to find a faint smile on her face instead. She was smiling at Mo Bei and Sheng Wenyang as they approached the group. There was no jealousy or anger on her face. No wonder she is worthy to be with Chen Xinan. Her ability is not bad, Zhuangzhu thought. Mo Bei was also shocked by Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue's presence. Zhuangzhu mentioned nothing about Chen Xinan, and he didn't expect him to bring Xin Haoyue along. When he received the call from Zhuangzhu, he was with Sheng Wenyang. Sheng Wenyang's company was about to launch a new series of jewelry with the theme, "A Couple for a Lifetime." She had brought the design to Mo Bei to ask for his opinion on the designs. As soon as Mo Bei made a few suggestions, Sheng Wenyang started to edit, so they came late. Mo Bei thought that there will only be Zhuangzhu and a few others would be present. And since Sheng Wenyang still haven't had dinner yet, he asked her to come along since she had met them before. He didn't expect to see Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue. Zhuangzhu got up to break the awkward silence. "Beizi, you finally came. If you had come a bit later, we would have already started eating." "I was busy, so I came late," Mo Bei replied. A person who was seated at the same table mockingly said, "Beizi, I think you're busy with girls recently. I heard rumors that you're always with some girl. Now you're actually bringing her here for us to see." Xin Haoyue looked at that person with admiration and thought, "Bro, I'm worried for you. The person who was with Mo Bei was not the same beauty in front of you, okay?" Sure enough, Xin Haoyue noticed that the expression on Mo Bei's face had darkened. Even Sheng Wenyang's expression froze for a moment. Xin Haoyue looked at Mo Bei and said laughingly, "Eat your food and shut your mouth." His shame turned into anger. Chen Xinan was sitting beside Xin Haoyue, so he naturally noticed that her gaze had been on Mo Bei since the moment he entered the room. Even the smile on her face was weird. Chen Xinan reached out to put his arm on the back of her chair and lowered his head to whisper in her ear, "What are the melon seeds in your brain thinking about?" Xin Haoyue laughed and whispered back to him, "I saw the girl who was with Mo Bei. It wasn't Sheng Wenyang." Xin Haoyue wanted to explain after she saw Chen Xinan frowning. Instead, he questioned her, "Are you interested in Mo Bei?" Xin Haoyue really wanted to answer, "I do have a little interest in the male supporting character in the book." However, she could never say that. She could only smile and shook her head. No. Chen Xinan glanced at her, then turned around without speaking. Xin Haoyue had just realized that Mo Bei and Sheng Wenyang had already taken a seat. What was coincidental was that both of them sat across from her. Xin Haoyue moved her chopsticks, but before she could pick up the food, she heard Mo Bei. "Anan, are you not going to introduce us?" Chen Xinan had just put a peeled lobster into Xin Haoyue's bowl when he heard this question. He looked at Mo Bei and then he glanced at Xin Haoyue's line of sight. Chen Xinan introduced them. "This is the grandson of the Mo family, Mo Bei. This is my wife, Xin Haoyue." Xin Haoyue. Wasn't wife used only when the two of them were alone? Yet today, Xin Haoyue clearly saw Sheng Wenyang's hand trembled when she lifted the cup up, while Mo Bei inadvertently glanced at Sheng Wenyang. Then he replied with a smile, "Miss Xin, it's an honor to meet you at last." "Hehe, same to you." Xin Haoyue smiled politely and replied perfunctorily, "Hello." During this meal, Xin Haoyue didn't know how Sheng Wenyang and Mo Bei felt, but she had accidentally ate too much. Of course, the main culprit was Chen Xinan. He kept putting more and more food in her bowl. After she finished eating a small mountain of food, there was another small mountain of food in her bowl. When Xin Haoyue saw that he had no intentions of stopping, she turned her head to stare at him, warning him not to overdo it. Unexpectedly, Zhuangzhu made a scene out of it. Hey, that's enough. The two of you had been displaying how lovey-dovey you are since the beginning of the meal. We had enough dog food fed to us." Xin Haoyue wanted to respond, but before she could even respond, she was stopped by a clang sound from across. Sheng Wenyang's cup was accidentally knocked over and water had spilled everywhere, even her dress was wet. "Sorry." After she apologized, she ran out of the room immediately. Xin Haoyue remained seated. After looking at the Mo Bei running after Sheng Wenyang, she turned to look at Chen Xinan. Chen Xinan remained seated. He served a bowl of soup for her and said, "Be careful, it's hot." Xin Haoyue? She suddenly realized that she really liked the him right now. What should she do? Mo Bei stood in the hallway outside the bathroom. After waiting a few minutes, he saw Sheng Wenyang coming out of the bathroom with teary eyes. He shoved his hands in his pockets and leaned against the wall, saying, "You've seen it yourself today. When would Chen Xinan ever do something like that for a woman?" Sheng Wenyang remained silent but stared at the plant pot in the hallway. "Sheng Wenyang, wake up. You can't win, Xin Haoyue." "Why?" "Give me a reason," she calmly retorted. Mo Bei thought it was better for her to vent her feelings hysterically, rather than suppressing it. "Because Chen Xinan doesn't love you," Mo Bei said. "As long as a man was interested or placed a woman in his heart, he wouldn't allow a woman to live by herself all these years and not ask anything about it. When did he ever place your work, company, or life in his heart? Or at least even asked about it once? Wenyang, you saw how he cherished and adored that woman. It's impossible between the two of you." Sheng Wenyang stubbornly refused to look at him, but her eyes were still red. Mo Bei stared at her shaking shoulders, unable to force himself to speak harshly anymore. When Sheng Wenyang returned to the private room, she drank 2 glasses of red wine in a row before suddenly standing up. She raised her wine glass and said to Chen Xinan, "President Chen, I toast you." Everyone looked at Chen Xinan, eager for gossip. Chen Xinan lazily looked at her. Xin Haoyue's gaze landed on Sheng Wenyang. She downed the glass of wine in one gulp, not waiting for Chen Xinan's response at all. Mo Bei sat by the side and leaned back, but his gaze wasn't on Sheng Wenyang either. He watched with his arms folded. Xin Haoyue guessed that the two had an unpleasant conversation outside, which was why Mo Bei was acting like this. Chen Xinan didn't move, but this didn't stop Sheng Wenyang from continuing. "President Chen, thank you for helping me so much while I was in college. You helped me feel motivated." She downed another glass of wine. "I am thankful for you, President Chen. While I was abroad all these years, it was because of you that I persisted." She slightly choked with emotions and continued, "I kept on going for such a long time just for you. But I can't seem to find a goal to keep me striving." She paused momentarily and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Chen Xinan, I just want to ask you a question. What did all the beautiful memories that we had together mean to you? I clearly remember each time we were together. Our hugs, our kisses. Where did you toss these memories to? You clearly like me, but why?" Under everyone's bright and gossip-filled gazes, Chen Xinan stood up. He interrupted her endless rant by saying, "You're drunk." Sheng Wenyang chuckled. "I'd rather that I was really drunk, but I'm clearly sober. Chen Xinan, do you understand how it feels to be heartbroken? No, you will never understand." Xin Haoyue raised her eyebrows and looked at the two. Chen Xinan looked at her and held her hands, helping her up. He took her bag and coat from behind her and hung it on his elbow. He replied to Sheng Wenyang, "You are right that I don't know, because my life is complete." He linked hands with Xin Haoyue and ignored Sheng Wenyang, who had a tear-stained face of a beauty. He said to Zhuangzhu, "She needs to work tomorrow morning, so I'm going to take her home now. You can put the bill on my tab." After that, they silently left. Once the car was started, Xin Haoyue purposefully sighed, after she slowly put her seatbelt on. This noise was particularly loud in a silent car. Chen Xinan looked to the side. Xin Haoyue seriously looked at him too. Chen Xinan was unable to endure her sparkling gaze, so he shifted his gaze. He stared ahead and said, "If you have something to say, just say it." Xin Haoyue said pitifully, "It's sad that we left so early. We didn't even win Zhuangzhu's money back. Originally, Zhuangzhu had met with Chen Xinan so that they could play cards. It's the same if we win the next time. I was looking forward to you playing cards." She knew that Chen Xinan had great card skills. "You'll have a chance in the future." Chen Xinan said this and changed the topic. "How about I drive you over to my house and you play a few rounds with my mother and grandfather? Wouldn't he be indirectly bringing her to see his parents?" Xin Haoyue hurriedly rejected. No, I'm not good at playing cards. I'll look bad if I keep losing." "You have me. What are you scared of?" "What?" If you lose, I'll just help you win double the money back. If you lose, it's on me. If I win, it's on you. Xin Haoyue pondered over this and believed that she wouldn't be losing anything. When Chen Xinan saw that she didn't respond, he continued to ask, "How does this sound? Want to come over?" "Of course not. I didn't prepare anything. I'm not going. I want to go back home." Chen Xinan glanced at her and didn't persist. He drove her back to her house. Once they arrived at the Xin residence, Chen Xinan said, "I'll come over to pick you up early morning tomorrow. You don't need to go through all this trouble. My driver can drive me over." "So it's settled." Chen Xinan didn't care what she had previously said. Xin Haoyue glared at him and said, "Hey, President Chen, can you take my words seriously?" "Yes, I always remember your words." Before she could ramble on, he continued, "We won't be able to see each other for another few days. Let me hug you for a while." Xin Haoyue naturally didn't think that he was just simply going to hug her. As expected, while Chen Xinan hugged her, he started to kiss her until she was dizzy from the lack of oxygen. Then he let her go. Her break was over and Xin Haoyue returned to work as usual. Who knew that the first mission she received was to convince Chen Xinan to accept an interview? This, Xin Haoyue rejected without hesitation. The chances of him accepting this are very low. Right, it's because of this that we meticulously planned this episode. If we are able to invite Chen Xinan to be a guest for our show, we definitely won't need to worry about the ratings. Xin Haoyue glanced at the chief editor and said, "Shouldn't we worry about whether or not he will accept this first?" The moment the chief editor heard this, his expression changed. He looked warmly and friendly at Xin Haoyue. "That's why we need host Xin's help. Win him over. Believe me, the next episode will capture everyone's attention." Xin Haoyue was speechless. What a group of unscrupulous people. If she was to interview Chen Xinan, it would be lacking emotions and rigid. The two knew each other closely, so why should they sit in front of a camera and talk about things, especially for the audience to hear? Xin Haoyue cut straight to the chase. "You guys can interview him if you guys want, but I'm not responsible for contacting him. You guys can try your best to settle this issue." Xin Haoyue didn't want to interview Chen Xinan. Therefore, she racked her mind to think of someone suitable to replace him. The chief editor knew that she had made her decision. After this, he went to talk to her a few more times because he thought that if the program group were to contact him, before the call could get to Chen Xinan's assistant, it would have been filtered out already. But if Xin Haoyue had asked him, there would be better chances. After all, they were close with one another. But Xin Haoyue wouldn't do him this favor. When Chen Xinan found out about this, it was already a few days later. That night, he just finished attending a dinner party. On the way, he asked Assistant Wang, "Have you booked the ticket already?" "Yes, President Chen." Assistant Wang respectfully replied, but debated on saying something. "Just say whatever is on your mind." "President Chen, so there's a TV station in a city who wants to interview you for one episode on their show." Chen Xinan tugged his tie and was about to say, "You want me to teach you what to do still?" when Assistant Wang said, "Coincidentally, Miss Xin is also hosting this show." "What?" The program group wanted to interview him, but how come he hadn't heard her mention this when they had called every day? Chen Xinan thought deeply and answered, "Okay." Assistant Wang was confused. What did this mean? Did he agree or not? Assistant Wang thought that since his boss was going to visit his wife, he might as well leave this for the two of them to settle. When Chen Xinan arrived at the neighborhood Xin Haoyue lived in, it was already 1 a.m. He opened the door and entered the house. As expected, it was silent. Chen Xinan attempted to walk gently. After he showered, he wore his robe and walked into the main bedroom to see her sleeping soundly. He couldn't control his smile. He didn't know whether to feel happy at her deep sleep or worry for her lack of alarm for living here alone. He used the dusk yellow lamp by the bed and wanted to move the blankets over so he could lay in, when he realized she was already on top of half the blankets. He didn't want to wake her up, so he felt his way around the room and walked to the wardrobe to bring a new blanket over to bed. While walking back, he noticed that Xin Haoyue had rolled over. He held his breath and walked over. When he had just placed the blankets down, she was suddenly startled. She abruptly sat up and said tremblingly, "Who are you?" Chen Xinan reached over and held her shoulders. "It's me, don't be scared." When Xin Haoyue heard a familiar voice, she borrowed the dim light to look at his face. After making sure it was him, she couldn't help but throw a pillow at him. "Chen Xinan, you want to scare me to death? It's in the middle of the night, and what do you think you're doing?" Okay, don't be scared. We can talk about this tomorrow. Let's sleep now." "Wait, no, why are you here?" Xin Haoyue was confused. "I am free tomorrow, so I decided to come over." Xin Haoyue found her phone and looked at the time. It was almost 2 a.m, so he hurried here overnight? She was extremely tired and figured that he might be too after getting off a plane. She hugged his waist and murmured, "Let's hurry and sleep." Chen Xinan kissed her eyebrows and hugged her to sleep. When he woke up the next morning, he just found out that she had already left for work. There was a text from her, saying that breakfast was already made and for him to heat it up before eating. Chen Xinan had an extremely good sleep last night. He even slept an extra 2 to 3 hours. Therefore, he was in a great mood this morning. After he rinsed and finished eating breakfast, he sent Xin Haoyue a text. Wifey, are you busy with your work? When Xin Haoyue saw Chen Xinan's text, she just walked out of the director's office. There was only one reason why the director called her to his office. She had to convince Chen Xinan to accept the interview. Xin Haoyue remained the same attitude. However, she couldn't handle the director's glib tongue. It felt as if she didn't agree. Then he won't let her back to work. Xin Haoyue was forced to say, he just returned to his city last night. If you guys want to talk, you can send someone over to talk to him. Although the director agreed, he mentioned many times for her to sweet-talk him. When Chen Xinan came over in the afternoon to pick Xin Haoyue up for lunch, he saw that she wasn't in a great mood. He teased her. You're already full from eating just by looking at me? Xin Haoyue was stunned and looked up at him. She then realized that he was just joking and wanted to make her smile. She chuckled and said, President Chen, don't worry. Just looking at you puts me in a great appetite to eat. You don't need to doubt yourself. Chen Xinan coldly humphed. I'm always confident in my looks. Right? Xin Haoyue followed along. After having 2 bites, she said, I want to talk to you about something. What? Xin Haoyue went straight to the point. The TV station wants to interview you for one of the shows. Will you accept the interview? Chen Xinan knew that she was the host of the show too. But seeing that she hadn't mentioned this piece of information, he said, normally, I don't go on these types of shows. I know. Xin Haoyue knew better than anyone that he hated revealing himself in front of the public. Who knew that he continued to say, but if you're the one interviewing me, and you give me some sort of benefits, I'll accept the interview. Once he finished, Chen Xinan purposefully looked ambiguously at her. Xin Haoyue clearly didn't fall in his trap. No, I think it's awkward to even interview you. Chen Xinan didn't really respond, so they dropped the topic. Who knew that 2 days later, Xin Haoyue walked into the office early morning when colleagues came over to congratulate her. Haoyue, you're quite magical. Chen Xinan actually agreed to attend this show for the first time ever. After it's broadcasted, you will definitely become famous. Xin Haoyue was frozen momentarily before she shockingly said, he agreed to attend the show? Yes, her colleagues happily stated. You didn't know? I heard that the director invited him out for lunch, and then he accepted this. However, we all know whose credit this goes to. Xin Haoyue was speechless. He didn't tell her that he agreed. Not long from now, the official announcement came down. Xin Haoyue was fully in charge of Chen Xinan's interview. At the same time, this episode will be live broadcasted for Gimmick. This was the first time this show ever resorted to live broadcast since the creation of it. Therefore, all the staff within the program group were highly concentrated and focused. Of course, because of Chen Xinan's request, he would only appear at most for 30 minutes for the show. The director said, President Chen, if we're going to live broadcast this, the whole process will be over an hour. If you only appear for half an hour, then our show. You guys will just have to figure something out yourselves. Chen Xinan answered. Therefore, in the end, the program invited a popular celebrity as guest for the first half of the episode. After 10 minutes of intermission, the main guest, Chen Xinan, appeared. Xin Haoyue naturally needed to replan the entire episode. She worked overtime until late at night. When Chen Xinan came to pick her up, she gloomily asked, Why did you agree? Is there a reason why I shouldn't agree to attend my girlfriend's show? Xin Haoyue knitted her eyebrows and remained silent. Chen Xinan laughed and asked, Am I that embarrassing to show to the public? Xin Haoyue slapped his hand, which was pinching her face. It's because you're too presentable that I'm unwilling to present you to the public. Chen Xinan chuckled, and before he could say something, he heard Xin Haoyue say, Plus, I don't want you to do something you dislike for me. This isn't too bad for me. Just relax and treat me like a normal guest. Xin Haoyue murmured, How are you normal? She felt completely different around him. Because there were urgent matters in the company, Chen Xinan returned to Shengjin City earlier than planned. Spending the next several days without him, Xin Haoyue could use this time to calm down and prepare for the draft of the episode. After an official announcement on Weibo that Chen Xinan was going to attend the show, it created huge sensations. The extraordinary and wealthy Chen Xinan was finally going to attend a show? The users left comments saying that they were eager to see his appearance. The day of the live broadcast, they followed the procedure and simply rehearsed in the afternoon. Because Chen Xinan was still on the plane, he was naturally exempt from this. After dinner, Xin Haoyue had been adjusting and calmly herself. She attempted to prepare to host in her best state. During the beginning of the episode, although she was a bit nervous, she quickly entered her state. No matter whether she was facing the guests or the cameras, she appeared to be calm and imposing. This popular celebrity's surname was Li, and he was only 25 years old. But because of his exquisite acting and remarkable appearance, he immediately won many fans over after appearing in several TV shows. Xin Haoyue chatted with him comfortably, as if they were friends. After that, they mentioned their dreams. He said, I have a simple dream. I just want to have a peaceful and enjoyable job along with someone I like, and form a happy family with them. Xin Haoyue smiled and said, Probably numerous people have the same dream. Host Xin thinks so? Yes, I think that's how life should be lived. work, family, and friends. Both Jin, so what do you think you're still missing? Xin Haoyue thought about it and grinned. I think I'm quite happy right now, so I treasure the moments. So is host Jin taken right now? Xin Haoyue didn't think he would be that curious. She grinned and said, Yep, I have a boyfriend. Then is your boyfriend more handsome than me? Xin Haoyue replied, If I say that you can't compare to my boyfriend, your fans will probably be angry with me. But if I were to say that my boyfriend can't compare to you, my boyfriend will be angry and ignore me for a good half a month. Despite this, I still want to say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It goes without saying what her answer was. When the program was nearing its intermission, Xin Haoyue thanked him for coming. He faintly smiled at him. Thank you, host Xin. I had a relaxing and enjoyable conversation with you. Thank you. Hopefully I will have a chance to invite you to our show again in the future. Of course. The first half of the episode was successful, and the audience reacted finely. While they were in an intermission, the makeup artist helped put some more makeup on for Xin Haoyue. At the same time, she hurriedly called Chen Xinan. While they were recording the episode, she kept an eye on stage and hadn't seen Chen Xinan. She was worried that something might have happened at the last moment and he couldn't come. Once the call was answered, Chen Xinan answered, Don't worry, I'm behind you. Xin Haoyue turned around and, as expected, he was standing not more than 20 meters from her. He wore a black suit and intentionally fixed his hair. He looked immaculately dressed and attractive. If one looked closely, he gave off a dominant chairman aura. Xin Haoyue sweetly smiled at him. Chen Xinan walked closer to her and helped her smooth her scattered hair strands. He smiled and asked, You're that scared of not being able to see me? Of course I'm scared. If President Chen doesn't come, what am I supposed to do for the next half an hour? Chen Xinan squinted her eyes. I saw that you were having a good time with that young man. You probably won't have a problem with chatting with him another few hours. I did have the intention of continuing the conversation, but he doesn't have time. He even took time out of his work today to attend the show. He came straight over from shooting his scenes and needs to head back in a bit. I also took time out of my work to come over. Yes. President Chen, you must be tired. The two caught up and then the show started again. Because Xin Haoyue had casually chatted with him, she appeared to be more relaxed now. She invited Chen Xinan up the stage while people were applauding. After the two sat down, Chen Xinan secretly glanced at their distance. That far? Negative. President Chen, the audience and friends are very curious about your life, especially your career. Can you share this with us? Chen Xinan had a faint look on his face. I inherited my family business, and as the time passes, I've learned to master the field. Then during this process, have you encountered any thorny issues? There were big and small thorny issues. You'll only know how to handle these sudden issues, successfully take down a contract, and handle a company through practice. Xin Haoyue realized that it was truthfully hard to have a conversation with Chen Xinan. He would only tell you that you will learn how to handle problems after encountering it multiple times. When Xin Haoyue asked about his future plans or hope for his career, he said, create more splendid achievements. They temporarily finished talking about work and they started chatting about his personal life. Xin Haoyue asked, besides going to work, what would President Chen normally do? Spend time with my family or my girlfriend. He smiled at her. Xin Haoyue's face turned crimson and she responded, smiling, President Chen is really... For a moment, Xin Haoyue couldn't find a phrase to describe him. If she said he was considerate, after the show, he would definitely be arrogant. If she said he was blessed, it seemed like she was the person referred to. She was embarrassed to say that. Chen Xinan grinned, as if he had already seen through her thoughts. The audience was shocked by Chen Xinan's confession to having a girlfriend. Then they thought about how he claimed to be pursuing Xin Haoyue in the past. Coincidentally, Xin Haoyue had confessed to having a boyfriend earlier on stage. The audience erupted. So they're a couple? Chen Xinan kneeled on one knee and the audience under the stage shrieked and cried out enthusiastically. Was he proposing to her? Propose! 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 Xin Haoyue sat on the nude single-person sofa incredibly shocked. You? She opened her mouth but struggled to find the right words. Chen Xinan kneeled on one knee and picked up her left hand. In his right hand, he held a sparkling and exquisite-looking ring. While I was preparing my speech last night, I thought a lot about what I was going to say. But now that I'm looking at you, my mind is blank and I can't remember anything. There's only one thing revolving in my mind. Marry me. As Chen Xinan said this, he paused for a while before continuing. You said that you were scared that we were going too quick, but I think every day is romantic. I want to marry you. I want to be able to see and hug you before and after I go to work. I've been waiting for you for so many years. Let us be together until death do us part. Let us still be together when we're old and have kids running around us. What do you think? Chen Xinan wasn't great at expressing his feelings. The fact that he was able to confess and say this in front of a live broadcast and the hundreds of thousands of audience on stage and in front of the TV already made Xin Haoyue incredibly touched. She didn't know how people would feel when they were proposed, but when she watched him talk in deep emotions and lovingly, she really wanted to give him a hug. This thought became more and more intense. In the end, when he gently asked her with expectation, she suddenly threw herself in his arms. She hugged him and nodded her head repeatedly. She said, "Yes, okay." Chen Xinan was ecstatic in his heart. He knew that he was proposing to her in front of the media. If she had any concerns, she would have refused. But when she actively embraced him and nodded without hesitation, he couldn't describe the happiness in his heart. He stood up and hugged her back. He chuckled and said in a low voice, "Lady Chen, there's no backing out of this." The tears that were in Xin Haoyue's eyes fell down from his silly words. She reached over to wipe her tears and smiled at him. "I won't regret this. You can't regret this either." I swear with my whole life." Under everyone's intense applause, Chen Xinan wore the ring on Xin Haoyue's left ring finger. Her fingers were slender and pale, seemingly more beautiful than ever after wearing this sparkling and dazzling ring. He lowered his head and kissed her ring finger. "Now, you're really mine." "Yes," Xin Haoyue nodded firmly. She stood on her tippy toes to embrace him. The show ended in a warm atmosphere. After the show, everyone wanted to find Xin Haoyue and ask about her feelings to being proposed in front of tens of millions of people by the handsome, rich, male god. But, after looking around in a circle, they couldn't find her. There was no need to intentionally report or announce Chen Xinan's proposal to Xin Haoyue, because the audience had done its job. Whatever one should or shouldn't know, everyone found out. Xin Haoyue's fans were ecstatic and cheerful. With regards to Chen Xinan's fans, however, they exploded. They ran to his Weibo and posted comments of them crying. The majority of the users were calm and commented, "Show some affection to singles." Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue's friends found out about this one after the other. Mao Xiuan and Zhuangzu called Chen Xinan and the latter turned his phone off without sparing a look. After Xin Haoyue got in the car, she noticed that his phone was turned off. She asked in confusion, "Why'd you turn off your phone?" "I don't want to pick up the call." "What?" Her phone rang almost immediately after her words. It was Xin Chancheng. Xin Haoyue was about to pick up when Chen Xinan snatched her phone and carelessly turned it off. "Hey, that's my brother." "The same goes for your brother." He reached over and sat her on his thigh. He lifted her chin and frantically kissed her. Gutong watched the entire process and happily wanted to call Xin Haoyue to congratulate her. When she realized that she had turned her phone off for the first time ever, she called again. It was still turned off. That was strange. After Zhongqin found out her phone was turned off, she sneakily grinned and sent her a message. "Wow, you guys just can't keep away from each other. You must be getting it on with him." Passion enveloped Chen Xinan. After the kiss was over, Xin Haoyue panted for air and became confused and disoriented. Chen Xinan drove the car back to her neighborhood, exceeding the speed limit. Xin Haoyue got into the elevator and was trapped in the corner by him, enduring another round of passionate makeout. She was still conscious and pushed him, reminding, "There are security cameras." "I blocked it," Chen Xinan vaguely said in a low voice. He reached over and held her waist, bringing her closer to his warm and burning body. Xin Haoyue exited the elevator and went into her house. She was still disoriented. Before she could look at her surroundings and close the door, Chen Xinan pressed her against the back of the door. Their tongues were intertwined, playing with each other. Chen Xinan carried her to the bedroom. Their clothes and shoes were scattered on the ground, and they couldn't care enough to clean up the mess. The moment Xin Haoyue's back touched the soft bed, it was suddenly dark. Chen Xinan took off his bothersome shirt. He lowered his head and kissed her again. Kiss, tangle, tease. Xin Haoyue couldn't breathe. Slower, slow down. When Chen Xinan heard this, he moved his way down her lips. He kissed her chin, neck, collarbone, leaving a path of faint hickeys. Xin Haoyue looked up uncomfortably. She couldn't stop the panting. They took their clothes off and candidly looked at each other. Their bodies were touching. Chen Xinan's fingers slowly slid over her skin, leaving kiss after kiss. Xin Haoyue trembled from this torture. Her sensitive body could feel his fingertips' warmth and his lips on her. She hummed and moved, wanting to be away from him. He easily pulled her back. He lowered his head and gently kissed her eyebrows, tip of her nose, lips, earlobes. He gently bit her and noticed her body trembling. Then her originally faint red earlobes became crimson. His eyes darkened a bit and his fingers slipped into a certain area. He said with a hoarse and sexy voice, "Relax, otherwise you'll be uncomfortable in a bit." After all, Xin Haoyue hadn't experienced this in her 2 lives. Although she read a lot of novels and seen scenes like this, she was a bit lost and confused when she was really experiencing this. She tried her best to calm down. She relaxed her breathing but realized that she was still very nervous. She slightly moved over and slid her slender and soft hands over his neck. She buried her burning face in his shoulders and murmured unsteadily, "Be gentle." Chen Xinan's eyes were smiling. He kissed the side of her neck and he deeply exclaimed, "I will." The night was long, and the room fell into a passionate paradise. After Xin Haoyue experienced the initial pain, her tears flowed down her cheeks. Thankfully, he soothed her right away, and then she slowly got used to it. They sunk into euphoria. What the two didn't know was that while they were being sweet and affectionate with one another, the 2 families' elders called them multiple times. However, their phones were turned off. Chen family's elders directly called Xin family's elders, and they had an enjoyable conversation. They even made plans to meet up tomorrow and discuss about their kid's marriage. When Xin Haoyue woke up the next morning, she noticed the bright ray of sunlight penetrating the window. It was clearly late morning. When she remembered she had to go to work, she quickly sat up and tugged a certain area. She felt the fiery burning pain. She hissed and knitted her eyebrows. She looked down to see her naked body and her chest full of hickeys. She immediately thought of the bashful scene last night. Then she immediately pulled the blankets over to cover herself. Her body was entirely sore and painful. She laid back and pulled the covers over her head. She wanted to go back to sleep. But when she saw the blanket's patterns, she realized that it wasn't her blanket at all. "Aren't you afraid of suffocating yourself?" The clear voice rang. Xin Haoyue remained unmoved. Chen Xinan dried his hair with a towel and scrunched his eyebrows. He walked over and sat by the side of the bed. He reached over and pulled the blankets down. "You even pant from kissing. What gives you the guts to put blankets over your head?" Seeing that he just finished taking a shower and looked refreshed, Xin Haoyue moved into his arms and rubbed against him. She mumbled, "I'm tired." Chen Xinan reached over and patted her messy hair down. He smiled and said, "If you're tired, just go back and sleep. But I still need to go to work." Even if she hurried there now, she'd still be late. "I already requested a leave of absence for you." Her eyes brightened at the news. "Really?" "Yes." Xin Haoyue linked her hands with him and sweetly said, "Why are you so nice?" Chen Xinan looked down to see her pale white skin under her collarbone. He lost his control his last night, and there were marks all around. He kissed her forehead and lowly chuckled. "If I didn't request an absence for you, do you think you can get out of bed today and have the strength to wear heels and continue to work?" Xin Haoyue was speechless. No, her legs didn't feel like hers anymore. It was all his fault. It was her first time, and he enticed her last night into having another round. Xin Haoyue kept her head buried in his arms, not leaving no matter what. "You have to stay with me today." "Okay, I will." He continued to ask, "So Lady Chen, do you want to keep sleeping, or you want this servant to help you shower or eat first?" Xin Haoyue chuckled. Let me think about it." While she was thinking about her options, she was a bit curious. "Where is this place? I remembered that we were in my neighborhood. How come we're not in my house?" Chen Xinan pecked her and smiled. "Your bed is too small." "I have a double bed," Xin Haoyue argued. Who knew that he shamelessly responded, "It's too small and uncomfortable to roll around in." Xin Haoyue was embarrassed. Xin Haoyue took a comfortable warm shower. She was placed on Chen Xinan's lap while they took their time eating breakfast. By the time she turned her phone back on, she just realized numerous people had sent her messages, and she received many missed calls. Her family had called her the most. While Xin Haoyue was scrolling through the messages, she complained. "Look what you did." Chen Xinan reached over and pinched her waist. He helped massage her waist in order to relieve her soreness. He chuckled lowly and said, "If I don't turn your phone off, do you plan on picking up the phone while we're in the middle of doing our thing?" "You." Xin Haoyue noticed that he was able to casually talk about this like talking about today's weather. He really is shameless. She reached over and poked his face. "President Chen, aren't you supposed to be cold and indifferent? It seems like you've tossed that to the other side of the world. I'll only lose my face in front of you." Chen Xinan said this and lowered his head, kissing her. He teased and played with her tongue. At first, Xin Haoyue was avoiding him, but after his persistent pestering, she tossed the phone out of her hand and rolled on top of him. She cupped his face and returned the kiss with just as much passion. Chen Xinan enjoyed her taking initiative. He held her waist and lifted his head in order to allow her to do as she wanted. After a while, Xin Haoyue clearly felt the change in his body. She was embarrassed and wanted to get off him, but Chen Xinan held on to her. Xin Haoyue's face was red and she said unsteadily, "Calm down." Chen Xinan helplessly placed his hand under her dress. "Lady Chen, you want to leave after teasing me?" Xin Haoyue said. "I really can't. It hurts." Chen Xinan knew his boundaries and he was just scaring her anyway. He buried his head on her chest. "Okay, let me hug you for a while." Therefore, after he hugged and teased her a while, Chen Xinan let her go. He had no choice but to do so because Chen An had called him. When the phone rang, Chen Xinan harshly sucked the side of her neck. He hoarsely said, "One day, I'll make you pay for it." Xin Haoyue trembled when she heard this. She hurriedly got off him and sat on the other side of the sofa. She watched as he picked up the phone, and she remained well-behaved. Chen Xinan answered him and said, "Father." Chen Xinan glanced at her after Chen An said something to him. He faintly smiled. I'll find time to bring her over in a few days." Xin Haoyue's instinct was that he was referring to herself. After he hung up, she saw Chen Xinan staring at her meaningfully. She nervously asked, "What did your father say?" Chen Xinan lazily said, "He will be your father not long from now." Xin Haoyue couldn't retort. "We're not even married yet." Chen Xinan glanced at her. "Father called to tell us that the elders had made plans to talk about our marriage. Coincidentally, they're all there now." Xin Haoyue was speechless once again. She looked dumbstruck and asked, "That can't be? This quick?" "It's not that quick. I already proposed to you. We do need to set an earlier date." Xin Haoyue didn't know what to say. It felt like he was right, but something felt wrong. Did she fall into Chen Xinan's trap? Chen Xinan decided to return to Shengjin City in the afternoon. Xin Haoyue originally made an excuse, saying that she was uncomfortable and lacked strength. Who knew that he threatened? If you have no energy, I don't mind carrying you the entire way there once we're off the plane. Xin Haoyue didn't want to be on the headlines again, so she listened to him. She changed her clothes and found a pair of comfortable shoes to wear. She dejectedly hung her head down. The plane landed in the evening. Xin Haoyue wanted to go home first, but Chen Xinan said, "Your parents are at my home." She was sincerely frightened. She gloomily followed him to visit her parents. She was incomparably nervous that she naturally wasn't in the mood to admire the style and landscape of the Chen residence. The moment she entered the living room, she noticed that Xin Jin, Old Man Chen, as well as Chen An, were chatting happily. Meanwhile, Bai Ning and Wang Yinlin were preparing dinner in the kitchen. Xin Haoyue was somewhat ill at ease. After greeting her father, she looked at the two elders of the Chen family and respectively greeted Grandfather Chen and Uncle. Chen Xinan stood by her side, and he placed one arm over her shoulder. He corrected her. "It's grandfather and father." Xin Haoyue turned around when he undermined her. She gave him a look, indicating him to behave. Old Man Chen chuckled when he saw their interaction. "Nan is right. After a while, you will have to change the way you address us. You might as well start getting used to it now." Xin Haoyue faintly smiled, a bit embarrassed. Wang Yinlin walked out of the kitchen and saw the two. She hurriedly said, "Haoyue, you guys are here. Go ahead and tidy up. Dinner is in a few." Xin Haoyue was embarrassed to stay in the living room while Wang Yinlin was cooking. She hurried to the kitchen to help out. Xin Haoyue listened to the two families' elders' cheerful conversation. From that, she realized that they seemed to have picked a date for their wedding already. It was at the end of April. Xin Haoyue was shocked. Wasn't there less than 2 months before April? She wanted to ask if it was too quick when Chen Xinan, who had been silently eating, said, "I'll listen to grandfather." Old Man Chen was very pleased. As a child, this boy had frequently resisted his orders. It was rare for him to be on the same side as him this time. After dinner, they cleaned up. Then, Wang Yinlin had Chen Xinan take Xin Haoyue upstairs for a tour, while the elders were talking about the details for the wedding. Xin Haoyue closed the door and said, "Wouldn't the end of April be a bit early?" "No," Chen Xinan said directly. "Your name is Haoyue, and we'll be married by the end of April. It would be most suitable like this." Xin Haoyue glanced at him and was still a bit hesitant. "I'm not prepared for everything. There are so many things we need to do before the wedding. Will we make it on time?" Chen Xinan knew that she was restless. He embraced her and comforted. "Don't worry, you got me and the family on top of the wedding details. Just remain calm while doing your job. When the time comes, you just need to stay happy and be the most beautiful bride." Xin Haoyue was silent momentarily before she looked up at him. She smiled and nodded. "Okay, fine. You're in charge of the wedding. I have no experience." Chen Xinan kissed her hard and said, "If you had experience, I probably would harshly punish you." Xin Haoyue's smile was like a flower blooming. She reached over and hugged him, remaining in his arms. They already settled the date of the wedding. The hot search and headlines on the internet hadn't lost its popularity yet, so Chen Xinan at Xin Haoyue on Weibo and announced their wedding date. Xin Haoyue received a lot of private Weibo messages and comments. She didn't have time to look at them through. It was Gutong who reminded her, 2 months from now, you'll be officially married. I better be one of the bridesmaids." Xin Haoyue was confused. "How do you know I'm getting married that day?" Gutong laughed and said, "President Chen already posted this on Weibo, announcing to the whole world." Xin Haoyue logged into her Weibo and realized that he really did add her on Weibo. Then she noticed that she hadn't even followed him yet. After she did, she forwarded the post. She didn't dare to say too much, but she responded with a bright red heart emoji. PDA. Dog food. The users probably would have exploded again. When Xin Haoyue thought of this, she couldn't help but chuckle. She was actually looking forward to showing off their love. After Sheng Wenyang saw the picture Mobei intentionally sent her, she was off the grid. Seeing that she hadn't responded to him, Mobei texted, "Last night you said that he might be acting for the show. Look at today's Weibo. You should wake up now." Mobei told her time after time, there's nothing she could do to intervene between Chen Xinan and Xin Haoyue's relationship. He wanted to remind her once again, thinking that he had been giving earnest and thoughtful advice. She remained silent. In the end, Mobei sent one last message. "If you want to drink, you can come find me." In the middle of the night, Sheng Wenyang called him out to drink as expected. By the time Mobei arrived, Sheng Wenyang was already completely drunk. She couldn't tell if she was laughing or crying when he walked over. "He's going to be married. He's really going to be married. It's impossible between me and him now, right? Mobei, why do you have to harshly remind me time after time that I can't have him?" "Why?" Mobei allowed her to tug on his lapel, and he watched as her tears fell like rain. "Because the Sheng Wenyang that I know should be a strong, independent, and smart woman. She has ambition and perseverance. She can also be ruthless, but she shouldn't lose her pride for a man. Sheng Wenyang should be living with arrogance and integrity." Mobei said this, then paused. "Actually, I like you more when you were abroad. You were confident, charming, and dazzling. Wenyang, wake up. It's impossible between you and Chen Xinan. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Don't think about stopping their wedding or try to obstruct Xin Haoyue. Even if you have your way, Chen Xinan will never forgive you. The only answer he received was Sheng Wenyang's uncontrollable sobs. It seemed like she just understood that Chen Xinan never placed her in his heart. He was going to be married, and she had no chances. When she was abroad, there were numerous restless nights when she thought about how drastically her life would have changed had she not gone abroad to make herself a worthy match for Chen Xinan. If she had bravely stood by his side back then, would the result be different now? But everything was too late now. She couldn't change the past or future. Chen Xinan had to prepare for their wedding now. After sending Xin Haoyue back to a city, he stayed there shortly before hurrying back to Shenzhen City. Xin Haoyue went to work per usual. However, she could feel her colleagues' bright gazes on her. There were numerous people teasing her as well. Many media companies knew that the two were about to get married. They made appointments with Xin Haoyue, planning on interviewing her. Xin Haoyue naturally rejected the offer. She called Chen Xinan and purposefully laughed. President Chen, thank you so much. You really bumped my popularity up another level. Due to this, she became busier with her work. There were countless people inviting her to host charities and galas. Chen Xinan spun the pen in his hand and smiled. Yes, you're welcome, Lady Chen. Xin Haoyue was speechless. Of course she couldn't compliment him. The blissful days were short. An accident occurred one day. This day, Xin Haoyue was outside hosting a charity event in order to help impoverished children. When the event was over, she noticed that Xin Chencheng and Chen Xinan had both given her a few calls. She knew that Xin Chencheng wouldn't have called her so many times if it wasn't so important. Therefore, she called him back first. Xin Chencheng's voice was deep and gloomy. He said, "Don't be overly anxious." What? When Xin Haoyue heard his tone, she knew something had happened. Brother, what's going on? Xin Chencheng looked at Chen Xinan, who was staring expressionlessly back at him. He then chatted a bit with his assistant before replying. Mother and father got into an accident. They're in the emergency room right now. Xin Haoyue was stunned and forgot how to react momentarily. Xin Chencheng wanted to continue when Chen Xinan snatched his phone. I'll talk to her. He comforted her. Don't be nervous. We're already in the hospital, and we have the best medical team in the emergency room. Mother and father will be fine. Xin Haoyue felt a sudden coldness on her cheeks. She touched her face to realize that she had cried. She hurriedly wiped her tears and trembled while saying, I will come over right away. Don't be anxious. I already had Assistant Wang book the flight ticket for you. Do you need me to send him over to a city to pick you up? No, I can do it myself. Chen Xinan could tell she was pretending to be calm and strong. He said, when you're at the airport, call me. I'll come and pick you up. No need, I can go over by myself. Xin Haoyue bit her lip and couldn't control her urge to ask, Chen Xinan, my parents will be fine, right? Don't worry, nothing will happen. Xin Haoyue hurried to Shenzhen City in a daze. The moment she got off the plane, she received Assistant Wang's call. He had been waiting for her. He quickly drove her over to the hospital. The closer Xin Haoyue was to her destination, the more restless and frightened she was. Unexpectedly, Chen Xinan was waiting for her at the hospital door. She got out of the car to see him walking to her. He reached over and carried her bag for her, and then he held her hands. He rubbed his thumb over the palm of her hand, comforting, our parents will be fine. Xin Haoyue's eyes turned red and teary. She wanted to jump in his arms immediately, but because countless people were here, she held her urge in the end. She choked with emotions and asked, was the surgery successful? Very successful? They're fine, don't worry. Xin Haoyue nodded and swallowed the bitterness in her throat. God bless, they're fine. God bless, they're fine. Chen Xinan brought her over to the ward. The moment they were at the door, Xin Chencheng walked out. He closed the door and saw her pale white face, along with her teary red eyes. He said, the doctor said mother and father need to remain calm during their recovery. You can go in to visit them, but don't stay there for too long. Okay. Xin Haoyue softly pushed the door in and walked to the bed. She slowed down and tried to be silent. The two originally healthy people now laid on the bed with pale faces. Xin Haoyue recalled the past event and couldn't hold in the urge to cry. She quietly stared at them and then recollected herself before walking out the door. She just opened the door when she heard Xin Chencheng whisper, I told you not to notify her, but you insisted. Look at how worried she is right now. Don't you feel bad? Chen Xinan was silent. After a while, he said, she has a right to know. Xin Haoyue remained unmoved. At this moment, she suddenly realized that she liked and relied on Chen Xinan a lot. He understood her and knew what she wanted. He could make her feel at ease. He was always her strongest shield. She knew that if Xin Jin and Bai Ningning got into an accident, and if Xin Chencheng chose not to tell her in order to prevent her from being upset, she would definitely blame him in the future, once she found out the truth. She was their daughter, but lately, she wasn't doing a good job. Brother? When Xin Haoyue thought of this, tears flowed down her cheeks. Don't blame him. I'm already feeling guilty that I wasn't able to be with them in the first moments when they got into an accident. If you decided to hide this from me, I won't be able to forgive myself even more. Haoyue. Brother, Mother and father are out of danger, right? Yes, don't worry. Then he heard her ask, how did they get into a car accident all of a sudden?